I'm sorry, kid. It's not going to happen. You'll never be a hero. Those simple words destroyed the world of young Izuku Midoriya. In a world where 80% of the population is born with an ability or a power called Dan or Kozai, Izuku was part of that other 20% who will never be able to have one. Izuku's dream was to become a hero, just like his idol All Might. However, in order to be a hero, he needed to get a hero's license at a specialized school, but normal people like him couldn't even apply. At first, Izuku tried to pretend that everything was fine. He was being strong for his mother, so that she wouldn't see him cry, so that he would think that he would be happy no matter what. But inside, Izuku saw other boys showing their powers, training to be heroes, and without saying it, he felt how envy and sadness consumed him inside. Many years passed like this. While Izuku seemed to be a happy young man, darkness lodged in his heart. Izuku promised himself that no matter what he would do, he wouldn't let anyone see that darkness, that he would remain the same person, and that he would manage to be a hero no matter what. Years later, Izuku was in his classroom, reading his notes, while his classmates made a fuss. Teacher, well, young people, we received the application sheets for the UA school. Those interested can go through. At that moment, an explosion was heard from the back of the class. It was Bakugo Katsuki, a childhood friend of Izuku's who had become arrogant and had the power to blow up his sweat. Bakugo, don't even bother passing. You all know that the only one with hero material is me. Some laughed under their breath, while Bakugo took the registration sheet. Izuku waited until Bakugo had passed his seat to stand. However, he threw things off his desk, which caught Bakugo's attention. Bakugo, hey you Deku, where you think you're going? Izuku froze, while Bakugo confronted him. Bakugo, did you go to the bathroom? Or are you going to tell me that you were going for an enrollment form? Everyone remained silent. Despite having no powers, Izuku liked everyone, but no one wanted to mess with Bakugo. Izuku tried to answer. Izuku, and no, Kaken, I was just going with the teacher to... Bakugo made an explosion in his palm to silence him. Bakugo, I told you, Deku, those who have no gift like you are worthless. Stop wasting their time and get out of my way. Inside, Deku thought of ways to respond to him, to challenge him and return the insult. He was fed up with the arrogance of his supposed friend, but he remained silent. Bakugo pushed Izuku away and left him lying as he went to his seat. At that moment the bell rang and everyone came out, except Deku. Izuku, Kaken, someday you'll pay for them. Making sure that no one was left, he took one of the registration sheets and put it in his backpack. A few hours later, a pair of thieves broke into an antique store and ran away. Instantly, two heroes named Kimui Woods and MT Lady came out after them. Izuku was on his way home when he found himself in the midst of commotion, watching MT Lady become huge to grab one of the thieves, while Kamui would use his extendable branches to imprison the other. Izuku, wow, it was a pretty quick arrest. While the heroes were handcuffing the thieves, Izuku noticed a third one sneaking away with a backpack. Izuku had a hunch and ran after him. The thief realized that he was being chased, but he continued running through the streets, dodging passers-by. Finally, the thief turned around and felt cornered, so he grabbed a backpack and threw it at Izuku, while using a bouncing quirk to jump onto the rooftops and escape. Upon hitting Deku, the backpack opened, throwing a large amount of money all over the alley, a few gold ornaments, and a strange black mask in the shape of a wolf. Izuku was collecting the money when the police arrived. Thinking he was one of the robbers, the officers were about to arrest him when the two heroes arrived to explain the situation. Kamui would deliver videos showing the shoplifters, who were already with authorities, and showing the missing thief in the videos as an adult of different build than Izuku. In the end, they let him go, while Izuku returned the backpack with all its contents. Izuku, excuse me, official, but I think something is missing a kind of black mask. Didn't you see it? Police, I don't think so. There's only money and trinkets here. Maybe the thief took it before he left. Izuku, but I was sure. Well, it doesn't matter. Police in any case. You have to come to the station to testify. There are a few questions we want to ask you. Izuku, okay, officer. I hope it won't take long. Hours later, Izuku was able to leave the police station. It was already night, and the light of the full moon covered the city. As he made his way home, Izuku felt something strange, as if a pair of eyes were watching him. He made sure that there was no one behind him and kept walking. Suddenly, he saw a shadow with a pair of bright yellow eyes that stared him briefly before disappearing. Again, Izuku decided to go in pursuit of that mysterious shadow. As much as he managed to reach it, he could only see brief flashes before it disappeared. After a few minutes of chase, Izuku arrived at an abandoned beach, where there was a huge maze of trash and garbage that had been abandoned there by careless people. Finally, Izuku came to a dead end, and when he stopped to rest, he realized that there was a black wolf mask he had seen in the alley. Izuku, he was right, it does exist. But what is he doing here? Izuku bent down to take the mask and check in the moonlight. Izuku, wow, it's amazing. Just as he held it in his hands, he sensed a dark and indescribable power. Unable to control his body, Izuku felt his hands turn the mask upside down and direct it toward his face. There was nothing more important in his mind than putting on that mask. Izuku, what's going on? He tried to stop, but his body no longer obeyed him. Finally, the mask jumped out of his hands and into his face as if magnetized. As soon as that happened, a purple aura covered his body as he heard a deep, evil voice. Mysterious voice, Izuku Midoriya, I can feel the darkness in your heart. Izuku looked around, but there was nothing but trash. Seconds later, the voice went back to him. Mysterious voice, for years you were despised. They called you weak, useless. Years of anger and hatred built up inside you. Izuku, who are you? What do you want from me? Mysterious voice, I want you to take that darkness and use it as a weapon. I want you to accept the evil power. I offer you to take revenge on your enemies. Izuku, vengeance? It was true. Izuku resented the situation, but he would never have wanted revenge on anyone. Izuku, I don't want to hurt anyone. Mysterious voice, that's what you say. But deep down, you want to show all of them that you are a much better hero than they can ever be. Izuku resisted, trying to take off the mask, but no matter how hard he pulled, he couldn't take it off. He tried to close his heart, but still the mask continued to tempt him to accept. Izuku, enough, I don't want this. Mysterious voice, don't resist. In the end, you will accept the power I offer you. We will be inseparable. We will be indestructible. And we will prove to the whole world that we are better. Much better than Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku, Kaken? Just hearing her name made Izuku skip a beat in his heart, remembering all those years of mockery and abuse. That was all the mask needed, finally releasing all the darkness in his heart. Izuku screamed in pain, while the dark power enveloped him and covered his entire body. Mysterious voice. From now on, Bakugo will never be able to make fun of you. You will be much more powerful than him. Izuku felt his body being invaded by darkness, causing his height to increase and his muscles to strengthen. His vocal cords began to change, making his voice sound deep and intimidating, similar to a wolf growling. Mysterious voice. Now, whenever someone makes fun of you, you'll have them test the edge of your sword. If they don't respect you, they will surely fear you. The darkness solidified around Izuku, forming a dark black armor. Meanwhile, the mask fused his face and changed shape, with a huge snout with sharp fangs and a pair of pointy ears overhead. Izuku's hair changed from greenish-black to grayish-white. The eyes behind the holes in the mask turned yellow and bright, and a huge horn sprouted from his forehead. Frightened, Izuku looked at his gloved hands and brought them to his head, where he could feel the horn sprouting from his skull and the long snout of the mask. He looked around for a reflective surface, a piece of broken mirror being the best he could find, only to see in his reflection the glow of his yellowish eyes and the dark armor shining under the moon. Izuku, wait, is it me? Where did this armor come from? What happened to my voice? Just before answering those questions, he began to feel a powerful migraine. Izuku put a hand to his head, but realized that it was no ordinary migraine. Mysterious voice. From this moment on, Deku no longer exists. Neither does your life as a weak human. You were never a human. Shocked by what he had just heard, Izuku shook his head. His mind began to blur, while the dark powers of the mask altered his memories. All his childhood illusions, his memories of All Might, his desires to become a professional hero, were beginning to fade. They slowly felt as if they weren't their own memories. Mysterious voice, you are a wolf or duke. You've always been an evil and ruthless wolf warrior. There is not a single warrior on earth who can defeat you. At the same time, several other memories began to appear in his mind. Memories of hundreds of combats and fights to the death. Memoirs about flute melodies, the full moon, entire armies surrendered to their boots. Memories of evil and absolute contempt for humanity. Izuku felt the power of the mask corrupting his soul. Izuku, no, this mask makes me evil. I must stop this. Must resist. Mysterious voice. From today on, you will be known as the evil wolf or duke, ZenAku. Izuku tried to resist as much as possible, but the darkness in his heart was too much. He had a vision of Bakugo, surrendered at his feet, imploring mercy and declaring himself inferior to him. Little by little his resistance to the powerful brainwashing was diminishing. Izuku, I'm not a human. I was never human. I've always been a werewolf. He slowly began to sit up, while his new memories settled in his mind. He now knew the enormous dark power under his command, the power of demonic beings known as orgs. Izuku, I'm an evil Duke Org. Revenge runs through my veins. Mentally, Izuku no longer put up any resistance, as her personality changed, and she became sinister and vengeful. Izuku, ZenAku, I am ZenAku. I am ZenAku. The migraine had finally subsided, and the transformation was over. Where once there had been a confused and scary young man, there was now a sinister werewolf clad in armor, with a look of deep rancor in his yellowish beast eyes. ZenAku, I'm ZenAku, evil Duke Org, and I'm here for 3,000 years of vengeance. Extending his arm, ZenAku summoned a huge curved sword, crescent sword, and swung at the mountain of trash in front of him, blowing it up and clearing the way out of the labyrinth. Satisfied by the scope of only a fraction of his power, ZenAku rested his sword on his shoulder, as he always did. ZenAku, too easy, just like in the old days. At that, ZenAku turned the backpack next to him. He bent down to pick up a piece of paper. The UA Academy enrollment application that Izuku hadn't begun to fill out. ZenAku UA Academy, it will be a good place to start my revenge. That morning, Ochako Uraraka felt truly motivated. The day of the UA selection exam had finally arrived. He had been training daily to do his best on the exam, and he certainly wasn't going to let his parents down. He got up early, had a light breakfast, since he couldn't afford anything better, and took the underground train to get to the UA Academy building on time. The exam started at 9 o'clock, and all those who are late are immediately turned away. Within 10 minutes of starting the exam, Uraraka walked toward the building, a mixture of excitement and nerves in her stomach. It was not uncommon to observe the other candidates in the exam, wondering what their gift was, and who their classmates might be. At the same time, she felt that she was being watched. Uraraka looked both ways, but couldn't see anything suspicious. Although being surrounded by people with diverse and extravagant gifts, it was impossible to stand out. I'd better hurry, she said to herself, heading toward the building. A few meters away, hidden behind the foliage of a tree, a pair of bright and yellowish eyes looked in his direction. Once inside the main building, Ochako, along with all the applicants, went to the multipurpose room for the orientation exam of the hero course. Once everyone was seated, a man with an exaggerated hairstyle and a loud voice addressed the teenagers in the room. It was none other than Present Mike, one of Japan's best-known heroes. Howtare, boys and girls. Welcome to the orientation course for UA's new class of heroes. The professional hero told his audience, with a powerful voice that echoed throughout the room without the need for a microphone or amplifier. I hope everyone is ready to give their best, because only the best will be able to belong to the elite of UA. They're all Eastas. Silence. None of the attendees made a single noise. Okay, as mentioned in your application sheet, the exam will be held in one of our combat simulation cities. He pointed to Present Mike, as a graphic appeared on the screen behind him. As you will see, there are 3 types of out-of-control combat robots. Your duty will be to use your gifts with ingenuity and practicality, and for every robot you defeat, you will score combat points. Ochako was paralyzed. He didn't know that they would have to do a combat exercise so early in his exam. Her gift, zero gravity, allowed her to remove the effect of gravity from any object she touched with her fingers, and although she was practical in rescue matters, she would have to figure out how to defeat the robots and come out unscathed. At least he was grateful to have had a light breakfast, so he could use his gift to the fullest without worrying about vomiting. Wait a minute. A voice could be heard from across the room as a boy with bluish hair and glasses raised his hand. Is a mistake, or why is one of the robots marked with 0 points? That wouldn't make sense. Oh, it's a perfectly valid question. You see, as heroes you must decide whether to fight or seek refuge. The 0-point robots are the most dangerous and indestructible, so you are advised to focus on the robots that are worth points. President Mike explained. I see, Ochako said to herself. That meant that the robots increased their difficulty according to the number of points. If he played his cards right, he could accumulate a good amount of points by defeating the weaker robots. Well, if there are no more questions, go to the area marked on your application form. But before we go, I want to listen loud and loud. Plus ultra. Silence. Apparently, no one wanted to go along with him. 15 minutes later, Ochako, along with about 30 other aspirants, was in front of a huge walled city, with a large metal gate in front. Ochako had heard of these training cities, of course. Ghost towns built for the sole purpose of conducting safe training for hero courses. Ochako looked around, and was reassured to see that other aspirants were equally or more nervous than her. However, she could not shake the feeling that someone from a distance was watching her carefully. No, I must concentrate on the test. No nerves, Ochako said, and dedicated herself to stretching and breathing exercises to prepare for test. All right, Group B, it's time to start your trial. Run to the city now. President Mike indicated, at the same time that the doors opened wide. All the aspirants looked at each other, confused. Usually there would be an announcement prior to start a race, but apparently it had been planned that way to catch them off guard. Without thinking, they all ran to the gates and scattered through the city. Ochako was so surprised that she only decided to run in a straight line for a few blocks, until she was able to stand up and catch her breath. Her heart was beating fast, while the adrenaline woke her up and put her on alert in the face of danger. It was certainly what a professional hero must have felt when a threat presented itself. He did not have much time to recover when one of the 2-point robots appeared, which was chasing another of the aspirants. Okay, let's start. He ran toward the robot, and before he could recognize its presence, Ochako touched the robot with her fingertips and activated her gift. The robot rose into the air, and after levitating for a couple of seconds 3 meters above the ground, Ochako deactivated it. The robot fell thunderously to the ground, destroying itself in the process. Good, 2 points. Ochako congratulated himself. Now to run for more points. Meanwhile, in a control room, UA professors analyzed each of the training cities. The objective was to be able to identify possible candidates for the UA Heroes course. Although the written and practical tests were used to decide who would enter, the teachers would have the last word. Enhanced with artificial intelligence and a face recognition system, the computer provided teachers with real-time candidate data, their scores, minimum distance to the next hostile robot, and interactions between applicants. That Katsuki Bakugo is a savage, but he is ahead, said one of them. Tenya Ida is speeding through the city. Very good job, said another. Yuga Aoyama is going slowly but surely, commented a third. Well, it's time to move on to the next phase of the... One of them began to say, but stopped in its tracks while looking at the monitor. Wait, who is that? On the monitor was a tall figure, covered in black armor, with a mask covering his face and a long horn sticking out of his forehead. None of those present could believe it. Had someone inadvertently breached its security perimeter? It looks like he's a villain. Director Nizu, should we mark the authorities? One of them asked. The director stood up, approaching the screen. Wait a minute. It can't be, can it? He said aloud, astonished to see that the computer recognized the stranger perfectly. Is that a contender? Where did it come from? 10 minutes after starting the test, Ochako had already managed to lift a dozen robots, and then dropped them. Well, that should add up to 28 points. He looked around. Several robots had already been destroyed by his companions. If he wanted to accumulate points, he had to beat them to it. Maybe if I take a walk around the city, I could. But at that moment, a strong tremor shook the entire city. What's it? Asked Ochako. Suddenly, giant robots began to emerge from the earth. They were the fearsome giant 0-point robots. She quickly calculated that it would be impossible to get close to these robots without getting hurt, so she decided to flee as soon as possible. However, one of the nearby buildings was beginning to collapse, and Ochako was unable to react in time before a huge stone hit her leg. "Hey, help!" shouted Ochako. The rubble had her immobilized, and no matter how much she stretched her arms, she could not touch the stones that held her captive. All the other aspirants fled in terror, and none of them noticed their situation. Ochako assumed that the UA Academy would not allow something serious to happen to him, but if she didn't get out of that one, she wouldn't be able to prove her worth as a future heroine. The 0-point robot was heading toward its position. Terrified, Ochako tried to find some object that she could float to defend herself, but found nothing useful around her. However, when the robot was a few feet away, something incredible happened. An energy attack in the form of a curved blade pierced through the robot, splitting it diagonally and causing a large explosion instead. Ochako coughed as she perceived a shadow walking through the smoke of the explosion. When it finally stopped, Ochako could see more closely. He was a tall, burly person wearing dark, intimidating armor and carrying a huge curved sword in his right hand. On his face was a black mask in the shape of a wolf with a long horn sticking out his forehead and a pair of yellowish eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. The masked man approached the place where Ochako was. Without saying anything, he stuck the huge blade into the ground, leaned in front of the debris, and grabbed the tops of the rubble with one hand. Using his impressive strength, he managed to lift a huge piece of stone that was trapping Ochako's leg without hurting her. Ochako immediately tried to stand up, but a sharp pain in her leg stopped her. He had apparently not seriously fractured his leg, but the impact had caused a cut along his shin. "Don't move," said the masked man, in a deep, raspy voice that resembled a dog's growl. He immediately took out a strange dagger with holes in it from his belt, cut a piece of cloth, and smeared it with a kind of herbal paste, carefully applying it to the girl's wound. "You'll be better off with that," he said, as he stood up to leave. "No, wait!" shouted Ochako, as the masked man turned his head in his direction. It really seemed intimidating. In fact, it could be said that he looked like a villain, but he could not misjudge the subject who rescued her. I just wanted to thank you." "To save me, of course," Ochako said. "Who are you?" The masked subject did not flinch. He turned his head to turn his back completely. "My name is ZenAku," he replied, after which he turned into a kind of purple shadow that jumped through the buildings at high speed. Ochako tried to remember, but on the bus on the way to the walled city, she hadn't remembered seeing someone like that. Anyway, I was grateful that it came at the right time. With some effort, Ochako stood, taking a nearby rod for support, and began to walk. "There are 5 minutes left to finish the practical exam, so give your best. If you need medical help, go to the door to be treated," announced Mike. Ochako sighed. With her injured leg, there wouldn't be much to do. At least, she was glad she had put in the effort. In the control center, all the teachers watched as the test came to an end. Year after year, UA faculty found real diamonds in the rough by doing the tests and demonstrating their ingenuity and skill. But it was nothing like what they saw with the Wolf Armor Challenger. With his massive sword, he smashed the robots one after the other, then launched ranged energy attacks, leaped over buildings with great agility, escaped gunfire with inhuman speed, and struck the robots with indescribable force. "This is impressive. I've never seen someone score so many points." One of the professors commented, "What kind of dawn does this boy have? Is it one of strength increase? Perhaps energy manipulation?" Another added, "It's hard to believe that someone like that exists. Not even the boy Todoroki has collected so many combat points." Someone else commented, "It's really a suspicious situation," said Director Nizu, an 85 centimeters animal who wears clothes and talks. The strange case of an animal that manifested at dawn. He's late for the exam, defeats dozens of robots, not to mention his sinister appearance. Any opinions, All Might? Behind the director, there was a huge blonde superhero with an imposing physique and an air of confidence and security. I think that... Pass the exam immediately, he exclaimed with a huge smile from ear to ear. Everyone around him looked at him dumbfounded at the sudden statement. What? Are you sure, All Might? One of the professors asked. Of course. Not only did he help a Urarka girl, he has also proven to possess an exceptionally destructive power. Young people like him should be trained to control their powers in the best possible way. All Might said with all his enthusiasm. However, to himself, the peace symbol wondered where the boy had come from, and why something about him troubled him. Perhaps it was that terrifying look or the precision of his attacks. He definitely wanted to know more about that mysterious, masked young man. After typing a few commands on the central computer keyboard, a message appeared on the monitor. Aspirant's name, ZenAku. Status, approved. Assignment, Hero Class 1A. In a forest on the outskirts of Mizurufu, Japan, lies a wide mountainous region surrounded by forests and streams. Even in a society full of quirk users, not many go into the woods, beyond casual campers or Boy Scouts. In one of the caves of the region, sleeping soundly, was ZenAku, who had chosen that forest to have a refuge away from the curious gazes of humans. Duke Org was lying on his back on the floor. Despite wearing his dark armor, he had no problem sleeping comfortably. In fact, he preferred it to be ready for the possible attack of an enemy. In the center of the cave was a campfire that kept him sheltered from the cold of the night, and on one side of the cave was a pile of human items, many of them that he had stolen from unwary campers. Canteens, compasses, shortwave radios, among several others. Just like several months ago, ZenAku found himself dreaming of the same nightmare. A group of ancient warriors, coordinating with each other, surround him and attack him with short swords. He tried to defend himself, wielding crescent sword left and right to protect himself from attack. But it wasn't enough. Suddenly he felt cornered, with hundreds of warriors around him, presumed paladins of justice judging him with their eyes. And then I saw their faces. They were the professional heroes of Japan, feeling superior to him, judging him as a weirdo for not having powers. ZenAku was clinging to Crescent Sword, ready to demonstrate his superior power to them, to make them swallow his words. Hatred boiled inside him, an uncontrollable fury that made him want to bite and tear apart all those heroes and those who idolized them. And at the center of them was All Might, the supposed symbol of peace, with that absolute arrogance and his hypocritical smile on his face. ZenAku awoke with a start. He was panting, and he could still feel the immense feeling of hatred he had experienced. He turned to both sides, making sure he was the only one in the cave. When he saw through the cracks of the cave, he realized that it was dawn. Slowly standing up, ZenAku made his way toward the campfire and moved a couple of logs to stoke the fire. After stretching, he went to a stone slab that had been comfortable for him and sat down to reflect. That dream, he muttered to himself in his hoarse voice. It was true that he felt an enormous resentment against a society that praised heroes as if they were gods. But why would he always dream the same? And why did All Might make him so angry? He couldn't understand it, but at the same time he felt great relief at releasing all that rancor from his system. In any case, he knew that at any moment he would get his chance to get into action. At that moment, his wolf ears picked up an unnatural sound from inside the cave. He immediately turned around, his bright eyes darting toward the pile of human items. After a couple of minutes, he found the cause. It was a small electronic tablet, which was inside a certain student backpack, under a series of notebooks and student instruments. The screen was broken, but it still had some charge and received an internet signal. ZenAku took the tablet, pressing the screen in the center. He didn't remember seeing one in his life, but at the same time he knew what it was and how to operate on it. The screen lit up, showing a notification of new mail. UA faculty, welcome to the Academy. Plus Ultra, read the title. ZenAku pressed on the screen and continued reading. I'm here. In digital format. Played the tablet, while a video opened automatically. ZenAku recognized him immediately. It was Almighty himself, in a colorful yellow suit and the usual winning smile. Only seeing him on the screen made him growl slightly. "I'll be brief, young man." "ZenAku, does it say here?" "First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your stellar participation in the exam. Not only did you get outstanding marks on a written exam, you were the candidate with the most points on the practice exam. With 62 villain points and 30 rescue points, you have a total of 92 points. ZenAku opened his eyes, incredulous at what he heard. Therefore, it is a unanimous decision of the admission board, and it is my pleasure to announce to you, welcome, ZenAku. You are now a part of the UA Hero Academy. Attached to the post office, you will find everything you need for your first day. On top of that, at that moment, ZenAku paused the video, having heard what he needed. It took him a while to process what he had just heard. He had been accepted into one of the most prestigious hero academies in the world, and not only that, he had gotten the highest grade of all the candidates. Now if I'm hero material, all might, and all without the need for a quirk. ZenAku commented with a hint of rancor in his voice. Following a hunch, he advanced the mail until he reached the exam results table, where he could see his name in position number 1. But what left him amazed was seeing who was at number 2. Katsuki Bakugo, who had only scored 77 battle points and no rescue points. A grimace of satisfaction was drawn on his snout under the mask. Very surely at this time, the young Bakugo was at home throwing a tantrum for not being number 1, as he always boasted to others. It wasn't the revenge he would have wanted, but bringing down the fumes of someone as arrogant as him was a start. Putting the tablet aside, ZenAku stood up. Everything is going according to plan. Now that I'm part of the Hero Academy, I'll prove my power to everyone, exclaimed ZenAku, making a fist with his right hand. However, that means I'll have to blend in with humans, he commented, admiring his dark armor. I wonder if they will make a fuss when they see my armor. I can possibly register it as my hero costume, but as a hero in training, I won't be able to wear it all the time, he muttered to himself. It seems that there is no alternative. I'll have to go by clothes and my size. ZenAku said, bringing his hand to his long snout. Luckily, in this society it's not uncommon to see humans with animal traits, so I'll go unnoticed. Gathering all the money that was among his things, ZenAku got ready to head for the city. Luckily, she had a couple of weeks to get ready for her first day of school. He didn't want to admit it, but inwardly ZenAku was pleased to have been accepted. On the day of the start classes, ZenAku used his super speed to jump from roof to roof through a narrow forest until he reached the entrance of the UA Academy. He had to admit that, if he had looked for a cave in that area, he would have had faster access to the school, but at the same time he ran the risk of running into a hero like Hound Dog and would have to give uncomfortable explanations. I preferred it better that way. According to the mail, ZenAku had been assigned to Classroom 1A, which was located on the first floor of the central building. Inhaling deeply, he decided to walk to the huge door of the living room. Unlike other young people on his first day of school, he was not nervous, although he was curious to meet who his classmates would be. She stood in front of the huge classroom door, feeling slightly vulnerable. Now, he wasn't wearing his dark armor. Instead, he was wearing the UA school uniform. Dark green pants, white long-sleeve shirt, gray school jacket, and tie, which by some miracle he had learned to tie on his own. Due to his training in the past few months, he had to buy a size larger than he expected. The only 2 concessions that the uniform granted him were the use of gloves, a pair of simple gloves to hide his wolf hands, and footwear, a pair of discreet black boots. The only thing that hadn't changed was his face, which still had the wolf mask on, his white hair peeking out from the back, and the long horn on his forehead, which he had polished as well as possible. Feeling ready, he grabbed the doorknob and walked it to the side. Put your feet down from there. You are disrespecting the academy by mistreating the desks, demanded the dark-haired boy, moving his arms as if it were a menacing robot. You're kidding, aren't you? I'm sure you come from an academy for the stuffy. A boy with unkempt blonde hair replied. ZenAku recognized him instantly. It was Katsuki Bakugo, always with defiant attitude and an aggressive character. The dark-haired one took offense to the comment, but held back from replying. Let's start again. I am Tenya Ida. I come from the private Some Academy. And I commented that he hadn't even finished speaking when Bakugo interrupted him. Some Academy, huh? Is that why you think you're better than me? I'm going to break your face. Katsuki threatened, leaving Tenya frightened. Threats to your own classmate? Are you sure you're in the right place? He questioned incredulously. You're not the only one wondering. ZenAku finally replied, watching the conflict from the doorway. Immediately, both boys turned around and noticed their new classmate. It took him a while to recognize him, but suddenly Tenya exclaimed, Wait, it's him! The first place in the admission exam. Immediately, all the other comrades in the room turned to see the masked man at the door. Each one reacted differently when they saw it. I'm afraid of your expression, our ribbit, commented to Azuri, a girl with green hair and a frog-like appearance. Wait, I recognize that wolf mask. That's the boy who rescued me in the exam, replied Ochako Uraraka, who was sitting to the side. Wow, that wolf boy looks pretty macho, said Ijiro Kurishima, a boy with spiky red hair. That dark look looks pretty good on her, said Kyokujiro, a rocker-looking girl with audio plugs sticking out her earlobes. Is that boy really our age? He looks much older, whispered Minoru Mineta, a rather short boy with purple balls sticking out his head. And I thought we'd only have a Gothic-style student, said Hanashiro, a skinny boy with tape dispensers for elbows. Behind him, a boy with a crow's head turned to look at him, having heard the comment. At all this, Bakugo looked down on the newcomer. He immediately felt threatened by her intimidating gaze, but he wasn't going to let others notice. And what do you care? Do you think you are better than me? Who do you think you are? Placing himself in front of Bakugo, ZenAku replied in a calm but slightly defiant voice. I'm ZenAku, and I don't think I'm better than you. I know I am, and not only for the best in the admission exam. Bakugo smiled mischievously, his voice filled with anger. Yes, of course. That's not even a real name. And what about that ridiculous mask? Do you think you're more intimidating than you are? Challenged Bakugo again. Let's see. Take off your mask. Snorting, ZenAku replied, I'm not going to take anything off. This mask is my face. If you're afraid that he has a mask, the problem is yours and not mine. Besides, I don't tell you anything about your oxygenated blonde hair, do I? That comment displeased Bakugo quite a bit. Raising one of his hands, he began to generate small explosions as a way to intimidate back. What did you say? Let's see. Repeat what you said. Son of a... Enough! A sleepy voice behind ZenAku said, but loud enough for the entire room to hear. He turned to find a tall man with long black hair, with a tired, sleepless look and a long gray scarf around his neck. At his feet was a yellow sleeping bag, from which he had just emerged. Everyone pay attention. And Mr. Bakugo, no rudeness in my classroom or I'll have to suspend you. My classroom. All the students answered in unison, while Bakugo withdrew his raised hand and grumbled. That's right. My name is Shota Aizawa. I am your master teacher. And from now on I warn you that if you only come here to look for friends and socialize, or fight at the slightest provocation, you better go home, replied the teacher. And the same goes for you, he told ZenAku. He glared at him, but immediately understood that he was a professional hero, so he decided not to antagonize him. Well, now I want you to put your things away, put on your sports uniforms, and see you on the courts, said Master Aizawa with the same dispirited tone. You have 15 minutes. Whoever does not arrive will have a report. Despite his tired appearance and unmotivated voice, everyone understood that there would be serious consequences for the latecomer. Qui, a Quirk's assessment test. Everyone asked in unison. The 20 students were on the open courts next to the main building, wearing a kind of blue sports uniform with the letters UA on the front. But what about the orientation ceremony? Achiko asked. If they want to be in the big leagues, we can't waste time on things like that. Aizawa replied, now in a more authoritative tone. They've done standardized tests at school, but they've never used their quirks on a physical before, right? Now I want them to prove here and now that they can use their quirks to the fullest of their current capabilities. At that, Aizawa turned to ZenAku, whose uniform showed a pair of biceps marked on his arms covered in dark gray fur, along with hands with pads on the fingers and palms and short black claws on each finger. You got the highest grade in the entrance exam. What was the maximum ball throwing distance in high school? The question caught ZenAku by surprise. High school? I didn't remember much of it, although I definitely remember going to high school and getting 50 and... At that moment, a slight pulse of pain invaded his head, clouding his memory. I don't remember, but I assumed it was 50-something meters, he finally replied, the word 50 being the only thing left in his mind. Right. Now I want you to throw this ball using your quirk, as far as you can. Anything goes as long as you stay within that circle. Aizawa instructed, while passing a softball to ZenAku. As you want. ZenAku said, taking the ball and heading to the center of the circle. If he could push warriors twice his size with just one arm, throwing a ball into the air would be child's play. ZenAku stretched out his arms, held the ball firmly, gathered momentum, tensed the muscles in his arms, and threw as hard as he could. The ball shot into the sky, where it was out of sight. The other students were stunned, while Aizawa waited for the signal of the ball on his phone. Soon after, a short beep announced the fall of the ball to the ground, marking 1,250 meters of distance. Today, they will participate in 8 physical tests. From there, I'll determine if they're capable enough to keep up with the hero class. If I determine that any of you are incapable of giving 100%, that person will be expelled from the academy immediately. Aizawa commented bluntly, far from scaring them. The threat managed to excite the students to show the best of each one. On the other hand, ZenAku simply rolled his eyes. A physical test? For a Duke Org as powerful as he is, this would be child's play. His wolf physiology gave him enormous speed and agility, not to mention the enormous physical strength he had gained from carrying the trunks of the trees he cut down with his sword. Okay, let's do it. Quirk assessment test results. Test 1, 50 meters, 0.26 seconds. ZenAku only had to turn into a purple shadow and break through the 50 meters in an instant. Test 2, grip, 999 kg. While a student with multiple arms, Mizo Shoji, had achieved a result of 560 kilograms, ZenAku had no problem using his strength on the apparatus. When they checked the device later, they discovered that it was broken. Test 3, long jump past a sand track. Using his wolf legs, ZenAku made an impressive leap forward, which allowed him to land several meters beyond the sand runway where they were to land. Test 4, side jump, Yarar. Again, his legs were making him move so fast that the measuring camera began to show errors. Test 5, ball throw, 1.06 kilometers. Test 6, endurance race, completed. Even without using his dark power, ZenAku was able to circle the court without exhausting himself. Test 7, squats, completed. His training as a warrior and his endurance allowed him to do a set of 100 sit-ups, one after the other, without stopping. Test 8, touch the balls of the feet, completed. His natural wolf-like elasticity allowed him to stretch and touch the tip without any problems. In fact, now that he wasn't wearing his combat armor, he could stretch so far that his muzzle easily touched his knees. At the end of the exercises, all the students were exhausted and sweaty. Even ZenAku, who hadn't needed much effort, was breathing heavily behind a mask, sweat stains under his armpits. Aizawa murmured as she reviewed the results on her cell phone and uploaded them to the school's server. Well, everyone gave their best. In the end, it was a lie. I'm not going to kick anyone out. It was just a minor disappointment for everyone to make an effort. And judging by the results, I think it paid off. There was only one person upset by the results, and that was Bakugo. Is this a joke? I'm sure the lapdog face cheated, he claimed. There's something weird about your quirk. I don't know what it is, but it's not normal. Everyone turned to look at him. Although judging by the talents and abilities of each one, they could not protest. ZenAku, however, laughed under his breath. What do you think is so funny, dog breath? I find it funny that you resist the fact that there is someone better than you, ZenAku replied. In the end, no matter how angry you get, it's not something you can change just by complaining. Then you're going to explain how you did that. Bakugo asked defiantly, "How did you become a shadow? Or that incredible strength? No animal mutation quirk makes you that strong, especially if you're a wolf. I could explain to you, Bakugo, but I doubt that someone so arrogant and hard-headed can accept it, much less understand," he replied again, in a truly contemptuous tone. All the other classmates could perceive the dense air between the two. "Did you call me an idiot, you fucking shoddy unicorn dog?" Bakugo shouted as he collected the sweat from his arms to turn it into explosive as he ran to his place. ZenAku reacted immediately, stretching out his arm and summoning Crescent Sword. At that moment, an enormous number of restraining tapes flew out towards both of them, stopping them in place. "Stop, both of you. I had already warned them not to fight, or I'm really going to expel them," said Aizawa, who had hoped that the fight would not turn into a physical fight. Their eyes had turned red, and they were looking at both ZenAku and Bakugo. "And you, ZenAku, should know that it is forbidden to have weapons of any kind on the school premises, unless it is for practice." ZenAku grunted under his breath. "The weapon is part of my power. The only thing I did was summon it. In addition, I believe that school was to always be ready for the attack of villain." He turned to Bakugo, who was restrained and angry. Stretching out his arm again, he made Crescent Sword disappear into thin air. "Okay, I'll let you go with a warning," Aizawa said, as his eyes returned to normal and he removed the bands. "It's time to return to your classroom for the next period. Don't even think about being late," he told the others as he left the place. "Bah, whatever," replied Bakugo, who spat on the floor and walked away. ZenAku turned in his direction, quite pleased with himself. "It seems that blonde is not going to understand a good way. For me, better. It's going to be an entertaining semester," ZenAku concluded, turning around and heading to the living room. As Aizawa walked away, he looked down at the floor, a little worried. He was sure that his quirk, Eraser, was taking effect on both Bakugo and ZenAku when he stopped them, but the latter managed to summon and withdraw his sword without a problem. Was the masked boy immune to his quirk? "That was a tricky move," Aizawa said All Might suddenly, who ran into this one as soon as he turned a corner. "Is this how you treat your students? Deceiving them?" "You said it. All Might, they're my students, and I rate them the way I see best." "Were you watching all the time?" asked Aizawa in a light-hearted tone. Let's say he saw the conflict between young Bakugo and young ZenAku. Nothing more. He's an awesome student, don't you think?" All Might exclaimed excitedly. "Impressive is a way of putting it, although there is something about the boy that still does not quite fit me. Someone with so much power and agility. Very suspicious." Aizawa warned. "Tell me something. All Might, the boy's quirk, do you know anything about him?" According to his records, his registered quirk is dark matter, which gives him the ability to manipulate matter or even his own body, with dark energy emanating from his body. All Might replied in a whisper, as the student's quirk data was considered sensitive information. "It sounds plausible, although if you ask me, he could have written black magic instead, and it would be pretty much the same," Aizawa replied. "Still, it will be worth not taking your eyes off that ZenAku boy. Everything can go very well with him, or very badly." That same afternoon, ZenAku was sitting by a small river, meditating on the events of the day. His school uniform, along with his sports uniform, were lying on a branch, drying in the sun. Because he had registered his armor as his hero costume, ZenAku decided that he must maintain and care for both uniforms in order to continue attending school. While waiting for his clothes to dry and to get used to not wearing his dark armor so often, ZenAku decided to don a black sleeveless shirt, tight black pants, a simple belt, a pair of leather bracelets, black fingerless gloves, and a pair of heavy combat boots. Even though ZenAku was unaware of the fashion concept of humans, his intuition told him that such a look suited a dark wolf like him. He held out his hand, but instead of summoning his sword, a short black dagger with several circular holes appeared on it. It was his trusty dagger flute. Without saying anything, ZenAku raised the flute to his lips and began to play a mournful melody, the same one that always hovered in his head. As he played, he remembered the test he had taken and how easy it had been to outperform the other classmates. In particular, he remembered Bakugo and his unbridled anger when he learned of the results, accusing him of having cheated, as if it were impossible for the blond young man that there was anyone more powerful than him. Just remembering that moment of triumph, they made him feel all exalted, an evil feeling of pleasure and joy running through his entire body. And just as they were about to fight, to finally see which of the two was the stronger, they were both stopped by Professor Aizawa's restrictive tapes. Although he was willing to fight and could have easily cut the ribbons with his sword, he chose not to. Perhaps it was not the right time for such a meeting. Looking up at the sky, ZenAku noticed that the moon was waxing. Feeling the light of the celestial body strengthening him, he decided to interrupt his tune. I'm at the bare minimum of my power, and without much effort, I was able to surpass the aspiring heroes in my class. But despite my victory, this is just a beginning, ZenAku said. Although there is something that worries me, he commented while looking at his gloved hand, remembering something that happened after class. After Master Aizawa's test, the students returned to the classroom to get their things and to take the rest of the day off. ZenAku wasn't particularly tired, but there was no point in staying in school longer than necessary. At that, he felt someone approaching from behind. Using his keen sense of smell, he recognized Tenya, the boy who was arguing with Katsuki Bakugo in the living room. "Hey, ZenAku, can I accompany you?" the young man asked formally. ZenAku did not want company, nor did he need it, but he decided not to be rude to his classmate. "What do you need?" he rebuked as he moved on, implying that they would not stop to talk. "No, I just want to congratulate you on your test results. You definitely have amazing abilities," Tenya commented. "I was worried that Professor Aizawa was going to make good on his threat, but I trust the school's judgment to be our head teacher." To give him his side, ZenAku nodded slightly. "I wouldn't expect anything less from UA Academy. That's why it's the best hero academy in the country." He turned slightly to the side, noticing that Tenya was walking next to him, attentive to what he was saying. He didn't get used to someone paying attention to him for so long. At that, ZenAku heard a familiar voice, along with a feminine scent approaching them. "Hey guys, wait. Are you heading to the train station?" he shouted toward them. It was the girl he had rescued in the entrance exam. "Oh, you're the girl who threw a ball into infinity a while ago," Tenya mentioned politely. "That's right. My name is Ochako Uraraka. You are Tenya and you are ZenAku, right?" he said in an enthusiastic tone, addressing both boys. "I'm sorry, I don't know if it's your name or what you want to be called." ZenAku turned to the girl. He would assume that a fearsome monster like him wouldn't be greeted with as much enthusiasm as Ochako was doing. "You can call me ZenAku, don't worry," he replied, as he continued walking. Ochako caught up with him to address ZenAku more directly. "By the way, I never thanked you for what you did for me in the exam. It was great. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't arrived." "It was nothing. Seriously, I just did what?" ZenAku commented, gesturing with his hands, as Ochako took his right hand to shake it in gratitude. ZenAku paused for a moment, returning the gesture suddenly, but after not reacting to it, he continued on his way. They were a few steps away from reaching the UA entrance, from where the other two would take the tunnel to board the train. But just before you arrive, "By the way, I wanted to ask you, what about that mask you're wearing? You wear it all the time?" Uraraka took a couple of steps forward, so she could ask directly, noticing the look of surprise in the boy's wolf eyes. "I actually had the same question. Not hot? I'd assume so because she's black, although I haven't seen you sweating all this time. On the other hand, students are allowed to wear masks inside the academy as long as the wearer of other means can be identified," Tenya blurted out, mentioning every piece of information he knew about the subject. As soon as they crossed the entrance, ZenAku made a huge leap upwards, and without them being able to avoid it, Tenya and Ochako lost sight of him. The two were dumbfounded. The movement was so sudden that neither had a chance to react. "Wait, disappeared? Oh, well, I guess the mask thing has to be something very personal for him," Ochako said. "Do you think I'm shy? Or maybe he has a scar on his face. Stop that. Is he using his quirk in public? Students without a hero license are not supposed to use their quirks in the city. It could cause an accident. In addition, the regulations say..." He had an exalted argument, making robotic gestures with his hands. Peeking around the corner, ZenAku made sure his companions hadn't seen where he was, before continuing on his way back to his cave. Putting away his dagger flute, ZenAku looked at himself in the reflection of the river. The same yellowish eyes, the same long horn, the same grayish hair, and the same mask as always. For some reason, he didn't remember anything beyond a few months. As far as he knew, he had always worn that mask on his head. Slowly, he brought his right hand to his muzzle. This face? Is it my true face? How did I become this? Just as he was beginning to remember, a strong headache distracted him. ZenAku held his head with both hands, trying to endure the pain. At the same time, one thought became predominant in his mind. You are ZenAku. You are ZenAku. You've always been ZenAku, he repeated over and over again, until his questions about the mask disappeared. Recovering from the sudden attack, the masked wolf stood up as if none of the above had happened. I should get my things ready for tomorrow, he concluded, as he picked up his uniform from the tree. The next day, regular classes began, much to the chagrin of the students in Class 1A. Despite being a school focused on training tomorrow's heroes, UA was also a preparatory school like any other. Throughout the day, they received courses in native language, mathematics, science, foreign languages, ethics, and civics, among others. The peculiar thing about the UA Academy is that the faculty was made up of professional heroes of all kinds. Present Mike, the hero who guided them through the entrance exam, was their language teacher. Ectoplasm, a hero with the power to make ectoplasm clones of himself, was his math teacher. Midnight, an attractive superheroine who generates sleeping gas from her body, was her art history teacher, and so on. ZenAku was not bothered by the classes, although they certainly bored him. A wolf like him needed to be active and ready for combat. At least the classes helped him identify his classmates, those who were talkative, like Denki Kaminari, a boy with electric powers, those who were quiet, like Shoto Todoroki, who had two-tone hair and a long scar and who apparently had ice powers, those who were intelligent and analytical, like Momo Yarozu, a tall, black-haired girl with the power to create objects from her body, and those who were simply weird, like Minoru Mineta, whom ZenAku didn't care much to meet. There were two people in his classroom who stood out to him in particular. The first was obviously Katsuki Bakugo, who was sitting right in front of him. You could tell he was still annoyed by the test results, and every now and then he would drop a low slur like, "Damn dog," or "You'll see." Once, believing ZenAku was seeing him, he turned to yell at him, but found himself face to face with his horn, and decided to turn around and do nothing. The other person was a quiet student sitting in the back row of the room. Unlike his other companions, he stood out for having a huge crow's head, with a large yellow beak and eyes with bright red irises. ZenAku could sense the great shadow power that the boy possessed, a power fueled by darkness. It seemed that the other boy felt the same way as he was watching him from afar, as if he were analyzing him. What impressed ZenAku the most is that, unlike the animals of the forest, who ran away from him when they sensed his predatory instinct, his classmates were not uncomfortable with his presence. On the contrary, they approached him and asked him for help with the class, regardless of the rancor and sense of revenge that invaded him. Something deep inside ZenAku was moved by the thought that all these boys, despite their power and skill, treated him as an equal. After 4 classes, one after the other, the students went to the dining room for recess, where they were served several hot dishes. ZenAku was accustomed to eating alone and hunting his own food, but even he had to admit that the food they served had an appetizing aroma. Ochako and Tenya spotted him in the distance and joined their table, though they were so hungry that they didn't really get a chance to chat, to ZenAku's luck. Finally, the break ended, and the students headed to the classroom for the second half of their day, the basic hero training class. They hadn't even finished sitting down when, "I'm here," standing at the door like a hero, shouted a huge, helpless figure from the doorway, wearing a brightly colored costume and a long cloak. Everyone instantly recognized him. It was All Might, the proclaimed symbol of peace, who let his cloak flutter a little before marching into the classroom with a heroic trot. "I can't believe it, it's All Might," Denki exclaimed. "So he is a teacher? This year will be great." Eijiro Kurishima, a red-haired boy with sharp teeth, celebrated. Hey, look, are you wearing your Silver Era costume? Tsuyu Azui noticed. What chills, it's so retro. Added Ojiro Mashireo, a blonde student who had a huge tail. Welcome to the most important class of the UA Academy. You can think of it as Introduction to Heroes, shouted All Might. This is where they will learn the basics of being professional heroes one day, to serve their community and to be agents of the forces of good. While giving his speech, All Might would strike several heroic poses and flex his prominent musculature, which was doubly highlighted by the tight hero costume. ZenAku just rolled his eyes. And today's lesson will be... The hero announced combat simulation. The news took them all by surprise. ZenAku's eyes flashed at such news, while companions had mixed reactions. It's about time, exclaimed Katsuki, who was also excited at the idea of fighting. But one of the keys to being a hero is, look good, shouted All Might enthusiastically. Pressing a button on the desk, everyone turned to the side of the room, where 4 huge vertical shelves protruded from the wall, each with numbered metal containers. These are the superhero costumes that the school created for you, based on the needs and requirements that you met when you enrolled. Everyone headed toward them to take their own, except ZenAku, who stayed in their place. Go, put on your suits, and I'll see you in half an hour at the training ground, commanded All Might, to which all the students replied, yes, sir, in unison. Aren't you coming, ZenAku? Ochako asked, who was already carrying his container. I'll come in a moment. You can get ahead, he replied. ZenAku waited motionless until everyone had left for the locker room. ZenAku took his container, the last one left on the shelves. Upon opening it, ZenAku found an exact replica of his own dark armor, which included everything from the dark boots to the mask, which even boasted the battle damage that his own had. It's impressive the level of detail they have with these things. In any case, I don't need it. After closing the container and storing it under his seat, ZenAku stood up. His eyes began to glow, while his body was covered in dark energy, and his dark armor began to materialize around him. Half an hour later, All Might was standing in the middle of UA's training ground, a huge fake city with hundreds of buildings, and in front of him, a long, dark tunnel through which his students would exit. It was an exciting thing for the teachers to see their students for the first time in their hero costumes, as if it were a kind of initiation. And then, led by Bakugo, the students of Room 1A began to emerge in the dark tunnel. Each of them dressed in different costumes that highlighted their characteristics and increased their quirks for battle. They say clothes make a professional, and you are living proof of that. All Might addressed them. From now on, you are all officially heroes in training. Just look at yourselves, they look so cool. At that moment, they began to hear a strange melody in the air, something that came from deep within the tunnel. Everyone turned, trying to make out something, but the darkness was absolute. At that, they made out a pair of eyes glowing in the darkness heading toward them. It was ZenAku, who was now wearing the dark armor he had worn in the entrance exam, holding the dagger flute and playing a mournful tune. The effect was such that everyone was astonished and intimidated by his presence. Wow, ZenAku! I love your costume, greeted Ochako, who was now wearing a kind of tight leotard with a transparent mask helmet. I think I should have been more specific with mine. This suit is close to the skin. It's not so much my style, you know? Meanwhile, the only one who seemed puzzled was Almighty himself, seeing the boy up close and wearing that dark and scary armor. I thought he was going to change his costume to look more like a hero, but he still looks like a villain, he muttered. Now that you're ready, I'll explain what the test is. All Might regained control and addressed a group of young men in disguise. There are 20 students, so I'm going to put them in pairs. We'll have 5 matchups, with one team acting as heroes and the other as villains. Having said that, All Might put out a small script with the specifications of the stage. Those who act like the villains will have to hide a huge bomb on some floor of the building that will be their lair. Those who act as the heroes must go to the lair to find the bomb and stop the villains. The heroes win if they manage to immobilize the villains or successfully extract the bomb. The villains win if they defeat the heroes or protect the bomb until the time runs out. That isn't all that's too advanced for us. Tsuyu Azui, whose costume simulated the patterns and coloration of a field frog, asked. Nonsense, replied All Might. Hero training is made to test your intellect and agility along with your powers, and there's no better way than a body-to-body workout to decide it. And don't worry, if I see things getting out of hand, I'm going to step in right away. But then you'll decide who wins and who loses? Momo Yaoyorozu, a girl with a curvy and tall figure, asked, "How much can we hurt the other team?" Bakugo added annoyedly, "Are they going to fire the worst team, like what happened with Master Aizawa?" Achiko commented, somewhat indecisively, "This time we will be able to use weapons." ZenAku inquired, ready to summon his sword if necessary. "I haven't finished explaining to you." He interrupted them all might, taking a huge box with spheres labeled through J. "In turn, we'll decide which of you will be teammates and what role you'll play." Almighty explained, holding the box in front of them. "Now pass an order and take a sphere." After a couple minutes, all the students in the class had taken a sphere. ZenAku checked a white sphere with the letter on it. Ochako, who had passed before him, had pulled out an H, which matched her with Chuyu. It didn't take long for him to find out who his companion was. As soon as he pulled out his sphere, the crow-headed boy turned in his direction with obvious amazement. And now that everyone has a team, it's time to determine who will have the first match. Let's see. All Might got his hands into two boxes, one for heroes and one for villains. He pulled both hands out of their boxes, indicating the teams that would face each other first. It will be Team A as the heroes and Team D as the villains. The others will head to the monitoring room to observe. He explained to them. Immediately, ZenAku looked around him and found that the only ones who were not leaving were Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. They would be his opponents. ZenAku and Bakugo exchanged glances. They both knew what this meant. "Very good, young Bakugo. Young Ida, head to the building marked as your hiding place. They will have 5 minutes of advantage to hide their bomb and study the building. After this, the heroes will have 20 minutes to attack their base. Remember, the key to success is to embrace villainy. Think like a villain would." All Might explained to the two boys, after which he turned to the other two. "Young Tokoyami, young ZenAku, take advantage of these 5 minutes to agree on a strategy. Every second is essential. I'll be watching you from the monitoring room. Good luck." He told them both with encouragement before leaving. Wasting no time, Ida made her way to the bomb site, carrying the helmet of her disguise on her left arm. "I really dislike being aligned with criminal behavior, even if it's for an exercise," he said aloud as he examined the bomb. After a couple of blows, he concluded that it was just a shell. There was no explosive inside. It shouldn't be a problem. "Do you think ZenAku is a quirk?" Katsuki, who had his entire back to Tenya, suddenly asked. He turned hastily. Katsuki looked angry, as if something wasn't adding up for him. "Why do you say that? You saw the test, just like everyone else. He was too fast and strong not to have a quirk," Tenya replied. "What's wrong with that?" "I'll tell you what's wrong." Katsuki mentioned angrily. "No quirk is capable of doing what he did. Superhuman strength? Also speed? Become a living shadow and summon swords from a distance? Those are already 4 different quirks, if we don't count his mutation quirk. Okay, yes, maybe his powers sound a little weird." Try to rationalize, Tenya. "But what is it that bothers you?" Katsuki grunted angrily. "It doesn't matter. In any case, I'm going to show that snooty guy what I'm capable of. Today there will be a rotisserie dog." Meanwhile, ZenAku and Tokoyami stood outside the building, waiting for the starting signal. At first the atmosphere became somewhat awkward, since neither of them wanted to be the first to start the conversation. In the end, Tokoyami succumbed. "We should memorize the floor plan of this building. It's quite big." The crowhead boy commented in a serious tone. "We have not presented ourselves formally. My name is Fumikage Tokoyami." ZenAku did not extend his hand to greet him, but he was surprised to see that Tokoyami was not seeking to shake his hand either. "Yes, I have seen you in the living room." ZenAku commented, "I can equally feel the dark power that you carry inside. In fact, I think we're pretty similar." As he commented on this, ZenAku put the floor plan in his pocket and crossed his arms. "Tell me one thing. Where'd you get yours? He asked. Tokoyami did not understand at first what he meant. The mine? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the crow mask, the one that gives you its shadowy powers. Are you an org like me? Demanded ZenAku. The question had no head or tail for the young fumigage. Mask? Org? I don't know what nonsense you're talking about, he replied, somewhat offended by the comment. I have a partial mutation quirk. That's why only my head is crow's. And if you're done, we have to agree on the exercise, he added, with a tone that was a mixture of serious and angry. For the time being, ZenAku decided to put the topic aside. It doesn't matter. In any case, the important thing will be to face Katsuki and Ida. He paused for a moment to think about the situation in more detail, and went on. Someone like Bakugo wouldn't sit still for long. Most likely Tenya will guard the bomb while Bakugo goes after us. Do you think you can face Bakugo by yourself? Fumigage became thoughtful. I think if possible, I would avoid fighting him, especially in close quarters. With my power, I would have better chances against Tenya Ida, he reflected. What you want is to face Bakugo, right? They have been looking forward to it since they fought against Aizawa. The reasons don't matter, but there's definitely something I have to work out with him. If he goes for us, I'll take care of keeping him busy. In the meantime, you take care of Tenya Ida and the bomb. Fumigage felt like he was being given orders, but not having a better plan, he decided to nod his head. Through the speakers in front of the building, both young men heard All Might's voice. All right, it's been 5 minutes. It's time for the heroes to spring into action. And remember, you have to act like heroes, not just look like them. Think like a professional hero would, and follow your gut. At last, ZenAku thought things were lining up, although he had prepared for his role as a hero of the stage. He only cared about facing Katsuki Bakugo one-on-one, and the exercise would give him the pretext to do so. You'll see, Bakugo, everyone will see it. His eyes flashed with excitement, as Fumigage took a couple of steps back, and the door of the building opened wide. As soon as the alarm sounded, both ZenAku and Fumigage made their way to the building at full speed. The interior was quite simple, consisting of a set of corridors connected to a staircase to climb the 6 floors of the building, in any of which Ida could be found with Bakugo and the pump. The first thing that came to ZenAku's mind was to use his nose to try and find Bakugo. He could certainly smell his body scent in the building, a peculiar mixture of sweat and nitroglycerin. However, no matter how much he sniffed, he couldn't find the origin of the scent, as if it was everywhere at once. As soon as he understood what was happening, ZenAku turned to warn his companion. Tokoyami, watch out. A loud explosion destroyed the wall to his right, while ZenAku and Tokoyami barely had a chance to react. Apparently, it had all been a trap by Bakugo to attack them from the beginning, without giving them a chance. What's wrong with you, lapdog? Are you afraid to face me? Bakugo sneered, standing on the rubble he had created. On the other hand, ZenAku rejoined, recovering from the ambush. He immediately summoned Crescent Sword into his hand, aiming at his opponent in a defensive stance. Interesting, Bakugo, if you think the best way to beat me is with a surprise attack, you're light years away from defeating me. Now, the two were face to face, leaving Tokoyami out of reach. Luckily, now we can find out, don't you think? ZenAku took a couple of side steps to stand right in front of Bakugo, while tilting his head slightly to the side. This time there are no teachers to stop us, you know? Bakugo threatened, popping a few drops of sweat to make his point. I'm going to leave you so bad that All Might is going to have to stop the fight himself. I'd like to see you try. ZenAku replied. Immediately, Bakugo rushed towards ZenAku, intending to kick him hard, but managed to stop it with one arm, grabbing him by the boot and using his own momentum against him. Bakugo was counting on that, so just after touching the ground, he lunged at him to launch a second explosive attack. ZenAku flipped backwards to dodge him, and as soon as he landed, he used his sword to deflect Bakugo's hand toward the nearest wall, which shattered. Immediately, Bakugo stepped back a couple of meters, while ZenAku brandished his sword in a circular shape. Infusing the blade with some energy, ZenAku launched energy blade attacks at him, sending him flying with momentum. Despite not suffering cuts, Bakugo felt pain at the impact sites, as if he had received minor burns. "What is this? That faulty quirk of yours barely hurt me. What do you want to try?" "I want to prove that I don't need to be at the top of my power to take down a villain like you. Although you probably already forgot what exercise is about." ZenAku sneered. "In fact, I don't think you're worthy of being attacked by Crescent Sword." At that, he snapped his fingers, making his sword disappear, replacing it with a dagger on his belt. "I am fully capable of beating you with my flute alone. Are you making fun of me?" Bakugo shouted, running towards ZenAku. It launched an energy attack on the floor, causing a brief flash of light that disoriented Bakugo for a couple of seconds. When he turned to front again, ZenAku had disappeared into one of the corridors behind him. "Come here and show your face." A few minutes ago, in another part of the building, was Ida Tenya, wearing a hero costume that covered him from head to toe. After spending a couple of minutes watching the weapon, he activated the headset that All Might had given him at the start to communicate with his villain partner. "Bakugo, status report," he asked briskly. "Shut up, I'm busy," bellowed Bakugo from the other end of the line. "Hey, you already forgot the mission?" asked Ida indignantly. "Just shut up and defend the gun," he growled, followed a few seconds later by brief static and then silence. What? Did he destroy his earpiece? Meanwhile, Fumikage had infiltrated one side of the building. Taking advantage of Bakugo's distraction, ZenAku beckoned his horn to the side of the building. Without his attacker noticing, he had told him to continue without him. They both understood immediately that if Bakugo had gone to ambush them, then Ida would be alone with the bomb. Being in the dark, Fumikage muttered under his breath, "Dark shadow," and immediately a shadow creature emerged from his abdomen, taking on a bird-like shape with large arms. The idea was simple. Find a fire escape, reach the highest point of the building, and from there look floor by floor for the location of the pump. Although he could use the strength of his quirk to make his way through the floors, he wanted to maintain stealth as much as possible. Fortunately, he didn't have to look far, as the bomb and Ida were on the penultimate floor. He immediately hid behind a column, waiting for a moment of distraction to get hold of the bomb. "Fumikage, he's alone," said Dark Shadow. "We can attack him from behind, and he wouldn't notice." As his quirk had a certain degree of autonomy, Fumikage was unable to silence him in time to avoid revealing his location. "Ah, Mr. Tokoyami, welcome to my den." Fumikage peeked over the side of the column to see Ida making her best impression of a supervillain. "Damn," said Fumikage, who came out into the open to face him. Adopting a mischievous and forced voice, Ida tried to make the best impression she could of a villain. "I knew you would come on your own, hero of darkness. But it's useless. Neither you nor your partner will be able to stop us." At that, he flipped a switch, lighting up the room completely. "Besides, I know that your power is weak in the face of light, so I chose the brightest room in the building so that your powers are useless." Fumikage felt somewhat embarrassed at his classmate's performance, but he didn't say anything. At least Ida hadn't realized that the light in the room had also cast shadows on the columns surrounding the bomb. "This won't take much effort. Ready, Dark Shadow?" he said, while Dark Shadow gave him a thumbs up. Meanwhile, Bakugo roamed a labyrinth of corridors on the first floor, trying to find ZenAku. "Damn! Stop hiding, you coward!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. It had already been 10 minutes since the start of the race, which meant that they had little time left to win by default. "Who says I'm hiding?" a deep voice replied from the shadows. "On the contrary, I'm giving you some advantage." "Shut up," bellowed Bakugo again, making a small explosion in his hand. Apparently, it was a kind of tick to denote his anger. "I've met several warriors of your kind. Arrogant, haughty, and irritating," the voice said. "Surely all your life you were told how great you were, no matter how many you hurt on your way. You don't know anything. Go out and show your face." He challenged Bakugo again, aiming at every corner with his huge grenade-shaped wristband, which had stored his sweat to create a huge explosion. It really scares you to think that there is someone better than you, right? Someone who puts you in your place for everything you've said or done in the past, all of those you have made feel less. In response, Bakugo activated the mechanism of his grenade, launching a powerful flame of fire along the corridor, while screaming in rage. Who do you think you are, you son of a? But at that moment, a gloved hand behind him grabbed him by the neck and lifted him off the floor. Bakugo used his hands to generate a bang, but ZenAku acted first, throwing him to the side. The momentum of the explosion sent Bakugo flying, hitting a wall. Before he could raise his hand again, ZenAku approached his position, dagger in hand, and slashed with great speed. This time Bakugo felt the cuts from the dagger, which slammed into his uniform and sent sparks flying. Trying to catch his breath, Bakugo tried to throw another kick, but ZenAku easily intercepted him and spun in the air, causing him to fall flat on his face to the ground. The other classmates from Class 1A were in the control room, watching the fight, some excited by the intensity of the fight, and others worried about its outcome. Truth be told, it was the first time they had seen a combat exercise that went to such extremes. "Excuse me, All Might, but don't you think they're taking this too seriously anymore?" Izuku Kirishima asked. "It looks like they could both get seriously hurt if they keep it up." With his usual huge smile, All Might turned to the red-haired hero. "Don't worry, young Kirishima. If something were to happen, I would interrupt the fight, but I trust that both will be able to control each other." However, All Might to himself was genuinely disturbed. Bakugo was supposed to be the villain, and ZenAku the hero, but they were acting more like a pair of rivals fighting each other in an alleyway. He really hoped he wouldn't have to get physically involved to stop the battle, because they were both training for real conflicts against people with quirks anyway. Everyone watched as Bakugo stood up, shouted profanities at ZenAku, and prepared to attack him again, only to end up being blocked or attacked by the dagger again. By now, Bakugo was already beginning to bleed from his wounds, but he was so stubborn that he kept standing up. Suddenly, ZenAku threw a well-aimed slash at the grenade-shaped wristbands, destroying them completely, and with a kick knocked him back to the ground. All Might could see ZenAku's eyes and recognized the murderous instinct that was invading him. "I must stop this." Bakugo stood on the floor, breathing heavily, his mouth covered in blood, while ZenAku stood next to him. He admired Bakugo's resistance, but by now it was clear to him that they did not compare. Again, taking out Crescent Sword, ZenAku pointed the end of the sword at his neck. "All right, this has come to an end," he exclaimed. "The only way you will pay for your sins is with death." ZenAku raised the sword in the air, ready to attack him with a single slash. Everyone in the control room held their breath, as they did not know how the conflict would end. "I'll see you in hell, Kakin," ZenAku exclaimed at the top of his lungs, as he lowered his sword towards the neck of Honk, and the match ended. All Might announced into the microphone suddenly. Everyone, bewildered at first, realized that, in the other chamber, Fumikage had easily defeated Ida and was now in custody of the bomb. The winner of the first meeting is the team of heroes. It took everyone a little work to understand that it was all over. When they turned to look at the camera, where Bakugo was, they realized that Crescent Sword was embedded in the floor a few centimeters from a young man's neck. "Wow, that was quite intense," said Izuku Kirishima. "It really looked like ZenAku was going to kill him. What chills," seconded Denki Kaminari. "Well, the failure of the sword was intentional. You need to be a sword expert to miss a cut at such a small distance." Momo Yaoyorosa noticed. "Then it did fail on purpose. Ribbit." Tsuyu Azuri added. "Still, it left Bakugo badly injured," lamented Shoto Todoroki. Soon, everyone headed to the training building, where Dark Shadow and Fumikage apologized to Ida for hurting him, although nothing compared to Bakugo, who after the intense combat had ended up with several wounds around his body, 3 broken ribs, and from the shock, he had gone into shock. Personally, All Might guided a stretcher-bearer robot to lift him up and take him to the infirmary without any problems. On the other side stood ZenAku, who was standing, absorbed in his thoughts. "Why? What happened?" he wondered, muttering. Then All Might understood the situation, assuming that the young wolf had succumbed to a primal instinct for violence. Putting an arm on his armored shoulder, All Might walked up to him. "Calm down, young ZenAku. I understand that it was an intense experience. The important thing is that both you and young Bakugo have learned something from all this. I don't need your help or anyone else's," ZenAku said sharply, removing All Might's hand from his shoulder. I know perfectly well what he was doing. Without hesitation, ZenAku disappeared his weapons and walked away from All Might. Wow, that was rude. Almighty lamented, who, despite being a powerful superhero, was offended by the young masked wolf's rudeness. Who does he think he is? After apologizing to Ida, Fumikage turned to ZenAku as he was busy fighting Ida. He was the only one who had not been able to watch the fight between ZenAku and Bakugo, although he could hear it from his earpiece. And like everyone else, he was baffled by his convincing performance. He wanted to approach him, but when he saw All Might, he guessed it wouldn't be the best time. ZenAku, another being like me, wandering in the dark. That night, ZenAku was back in his cave, thinking about what had happened. It had been a long day of school, and she had to finish her homework. But there was something that worried her. After everyone did the exercise, All Might congratulated them all on their efforts, but indicated that Bakugo would remain in the infirmary for a while longer. Fortunately, the UA had Recovery Girl, an elderly nurse with a quirk of healing wounds and training, so no one blamed ZenAku for what happened. Even so, the previous time ZenAku had surpassed Bakugo, he had felt good. Just watching Bakugo writhe in rage as he was overtaken had been worth it. But in the exercise, it was different. ZenAku was carried away by his anger and bloodlust, and he was about to kill him for real. Everyone thought that he had simply taken his hero performance too far, but he had every intention of piercing his neck with his sword and ending it all at once for the hateful blonde. But at the last second, he regretted it. He stabbed his sword into the ground, a few inches from his neck, sparing his life. Why did I do it? He asked himself aloud. I was about to kill him, to fulfill my revenge. For what reason did I deflect my sword? What worried him most was that word he had said to him. Kakin? I'm sure I told him Kakin. Why did I do it? Where did I hear that word before? He shook his head, grunting in frustration, when he suddenly remembered the school bag at the bottom of the cave. Turning towards her, he took one of the notebooks inside. It was a student notebook, which was completely filled with notes on heroes and their quirks. ZenAku had flipped through them before, though he had dismissed them as useless notes from a desperate fanatic. However, now I was genuinely curious about its contents. After turning a few pages, he finally found one that included a crude drawing, but quite similar to Katsuki Bakugo. He had several notes and footnotes about his quirk, the ways in which he could defend himself against an enemy attack, the tactical situations that would be useful, and in one corner was a list of possible hero names. All of them crossed out except for the last one, Kakin. So, this is where the name came from. ZenAku wondered, shaking the notebook in his hands. It may be, but I still feel like something is missing. Why did I use that name? Then, starting to think, she realized that she had been calling Bakugo by that name long before she entered the academy. Did you already know him then, but had forgotten him? Possibly the owner of the notebooks could tell you more about it. He immediately turned the notebook to see Mito's name. Just then, the head hurt intensely again. Immediately, he held his masked face with both hands, throwing the notebook to the floor. The pain was pulsating and strong. He felt his brain stretch and contract as if it were chewing gum. You are ZenAku. You've always been ZenAku. The voice began. ZenAku shook his head. He had to keep thinking. You are ZenAku. You must take revenge on all your enemies. Take revenge on all those who never believed in you. ZenAku tried to resist the voice that penetrated his mind, but it was useless. You are an evil Duke Org. Someone like Bakugo will always be your enemy. This time he escaped, but there are fates worse than death for that hateful conceit. The voice continued, using a contempt for Bakugo to distract him and prevent him from regaining his memories. Barely enduring the pain, ZenAku bent down to pick up the notebook, but instead his migraine became more painful. Destroy that notebook, the voice instructed. What is in those notebooks will prevent you from achieving your revenge. You must not allow anyone to read them. The voice threatened him, causing his boot to collide with the backpack and reveal the other notebooks inside. Destroy them all? Those notebooks are the only thing that separates you from your revenge. Destroy them, destroy them, destroy them. Unable to disobey, ZenAku took the notebooks and threw them into the center of the campfire, causing the fire to consume them within minutes. Little by little the migraine subsided, while his thoughts were rearranged. He was ZenAku, and his only mission was to take revenge on the heroes who had despised and imprisoned him for not having a quirk, including Bakugo. In the end, everyone will surrender to him, and the longer he took to carry out his revenge, the better it would be for him. Once recovered, ZenAku stood up, summoning Crescent Sword. It was already night, with the sky completely dark, except for the huge crescent moon in the sky. If he wanted to eat dinner, he would have to hunt his own food first. As ZenAku emerged from his cave, a piece of paper from among the notebooks began to burn, a piece with the full name of the author of the notebooks, Midoriya Izuku. A couple of kilometers away, the young Fumikichi Tokoyami was on the computer, locked in his room. He had already finished his homework, so he was idle surfing the internet. The first thing I had to look for was the name ZenAku in the search engine. Unfortunately, there was nothing about his classmate on the internet, whether he had parents, how old he was, or where he had studied before entering the UA. In fact, there was no photo of him, and he did not have an account on any social network. All that remained for Tokoyami was to investigate the org was it a new urban tribe or a criminal organization. He had no idea, but he remembered ZenAku asking him if he was part of his own. Searching the browser, he found none of that, though he did find a site of folklore and ancient history, describing the orgs as a demonic race that had been eradicated thousands of years ago. But just as he reached the bottom of the page, he discovered mysterious hand carving, showing a wolf-like figure with a curved sword that looked quite similar to ZenAku. But what a demo! Fumikichi froze in front of the image on his computer. The carving was quite simple, but the resemblance to his classmate was unmistakable. The size of the horn, the shape of the armor, the aggressive pose. All in a world where superpowers were commonplace, and being a hero was considered a profession. It was not uncommon for aspiring heroes to be inspired by monsters and mythological beings to form their alter egos. But he had a hunch. There was something there much more than just a coincidence. Refining his search, Fumikichi typed wolf org into the search engine. After several results on environmental organizations about protecting wolves, of which there were very few left in the wild, he decided to change his search to wolf mask org and finally found Mythology's site about it. Of all the orgs that historians have been able to document, none are as prominent as Duke Orgwolf. Although he does not have a fixed name, several records refer to him as Rookie or Wolf Demon, and he was feared for his destructive ability and bloodlust. He is referred to as Duke Org since, unlike the two horns found in regular orgs, Rookie only has one horn, representing his dark power and dominance over lower orgs. Records of its existence date back more than 3,000 years, during the Steel Age. In them, Rookie is described as a vicious and bestial warrior, capable of facing an entire army and emerging victorious, using the power of darkness to possess superhuman strength and speed, and with the power to throw lightning bolts from his hands. It is said that his power comes from the moon, that his sword could split mountains in half, and that his bright amber eyes were a bad omen, for anyone who saw them directly was corrupted by evil. It is said that no warrior was able to defeat him in battle, and with each victory his power became greater. However, a group of druid priests was able to stop him, destroying his physical form and absorbing his dark essence into a wooden mask, which was buried in a dark crypt to prevent his evil from corrupting humanity. When he finished reading, Fumikichi was speechless. Since he was a child, or in other words, since he was a chick, supernatural and occult themes caught his attention. Because of his raven head and his dark shadow quirk, he always saw himself as some kind of monster, a dark and misunderstood being. Thinking that ZenAku was based on a mythological demon made him feel identified with it, since he would surely have gone through the same thing. He began to think about the combat exercise. On the one hand, there was a conversation they had had before they started, where I asked him if he was also an org. "Where did you get your crow mask?" had been his exact words. Fumikichi laughed under his breath, as if his mutation quirk was something as trivial as a mask. Bringing his hands to his neck, he placed his fingers next to the base of his head, as if looking for the edges of a mask, and began to pull upwards, but it immediately stopped. It was an absurd thought. The second thing he thought about had to do with Bakugo. Could he and ZenAku have known each other since before attending UA? Which was weird. Katsuki hadn't made any reference to knowing him before, and there wasn't any record of ZenAku in his school, unless ZenAku was a pseudonym. Fumikage opened his beak and let out a long yawn. It was already a bit late, and the next morning I would have classes. He would definitely have to wait for some opportunity to be able to talk to ZenAku about it. Before sleeping, Fumikage looked up at the sky, where a bright crescent moon was located. The next day, ZenAku headed to class, again wearing his school uniform. In his head, ZenAku decided that the day before he had spared Bakugo's life. After all, such a quick victory in front of few witnesses would have been unsatisfactory and tasteless. There would be better opportunities for revenge. On the other hand, I was curious about his state of health, since he had truly been badly injured by their encounter. The word ZenAku wanted to avoid was worry. Why would he be concerned about their well-being? What did worry him, however, was the reaction of his classmates. He had been carried away by his bloodlust and his pent-up anger, though he did not know what that would have been like from the monitor room. Would they fear him now? ZenAku certainly wouldn't know how his teammates would react from then on, or if he should care. If everything goes wrong, it could ruin your plans for the future. Standing in front of the door of classroom 1A, the worst was expected. "Oh, look, it's ZenAku!" exclaimed Eijiro Kurishima, who was chatting with other companions near the door. Immediately ZenAku froze, while everyone turned to look at him. But instead of fear or anger, their faces showed admiration and excitement at meeting him. "Wow, yesterday's fight was epic. We didn't know how much you talked during the test, but it was pretty convincing." "Yes, I can't believe you faced Katsuki Bakugo." Hantashiro commented behind Eijiro. "We always believed you'd be the only one to give him a good fight. He didn't even scratch you." Mina Ishido added, quite excited, followed by Rikido Sato. "The truth is that was an impressive battle. We want to congratulate you, but you left too soon." ZenAku was speechless. Had he underestimated his classmates? She exhaled briefly, scratching her hair in confusion. "I just did what I had to do, that's all." He finally answered. "Hey, you lift weights, right?" "We go in the afternoon to the campus gym to train." Eijiro offered, enthusiastic. "You have to teach me how you move so fast," requested Mina. "Can you see the world in slow motion or something?" "Hey, how come you launch those energy attacks?" asked Handa. "I could give you tips to make your armor brighter, although not as much as mine." Yuga Aoyama commented, and Minoru Mineta commented, although as usual, no one paid attention to him. At that moment, Ochako arrived at the room, accompanied by Denki Kaminari. "So, you want to go get something to eat later?" he asked him. "Yes, of course, whatever." "Hey, ZenAku!" Ochako replied effusively, heading straight for the wolf. As before, ZenAku turned to her. Apparently, his fight the previous day had caused him a slight sprain, although he was already cured now. "Hello, Chako," ZenAku said. "You happen to be in the infirmary. Do you know anything about Bakugo?" he asked directly, bluntly. Caught off guard, Ochako took a while to respond. Yes, I saw it. He is still in the infirmary, which means that he has nothing serious, but he is still resting." "Yes, I see," ZenAku replied. After a brief, awkward silence, the others began to go to their places. Before leaving, Duke pointed towards his wrist. "I hope you're recovered by now," he said, and went to his seat. ZenAku didn't notice, but Ochako's cheeks flushed. A few seats away, Fumikage watched ZenAku being besieged by his classmates. He could not deny that he was jealous that a dark being like him should receive more attention, but there would be time to talk to him alone. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Bakugo was still resting. Recovery Girl's powers had allowed most of Bakugo's fractures to heal, yet she had to take medication and spend the night there to fully recover. When he woke up the next day, he felt as if he hadn't rested. There was something that was disturbing him. A year ago, shortly before graduating, he received a call from the principal to see him in his office. due to his aggressive and competitive behavior with his classmates. Bakugo was called to the principal's office quite often, so it didn't seem anything out of the ordinary to him, until, as he approached the hallway of the principal's office, he noticed several police officers interrogating students. Something serious had happened. "Mr. Bakugo, take a seat," the director told him, pointing to one of the chairs in his office. Next to him, a policeman in a trench coat took notes on his tablet. Rolling his eyes and hoping to be able to skip all protocol, he went to the nearest chair, but did not sit down. "Whatever it is, this time I didn't do it. I have nothing to do with it." Bakugo began to excuse himself, only to be stopped by the director. "This time it's nothing like that. Young Bakugo, it's something more serious." The director cleared his throat and continued. "Meet Detective Naomasa, Tsukachi of the police. We need your help to identify the whereabouts of your colleague, Izuku Midoriya. I always see them together, so I guess they're close friends, right?" "That nerd!" Bakugo exclaimed, though the director raised an eyebrow and stared him in the eye. That was certainly no place to make a scene. We've known each other since preschool, nothing more." Detective Naomasa jotted down a couple of lines before turning to look Bakugo in the eye. "Several of your colleagues claim that you were the last one to talk to him. Is that true?" the detective asked in a rather serious and authoritative voice, despite his calm appearance. "The last time I saw him we were in class, when they gave us the UA forms. I told my companion to get out of my way, for those who do not have a quirk are not worthy of being heroes, and I left. But I didn't put a finger on it," he replied. The director closed his eyes, holding his nose bridged with 2 fingers, as if he were about to handle a delicate situation. Without taking his eyes off Bakugo, the detective went through what he had written on his tablet. "Your partner Izuku Midoriya disappeared without a trace. He was last seen in front of the police station after testifying for a store robbery. Surveillance cameras show that he ran away, although we don't know if someone was chasing him or just in a hurry. Concluded. Is there anything you can tell us about it?" Deku classic, getting lost right under the noses of the police. Bakugo growled, but the director, impassive, beckoned him with his hand to stop. "The situation is more serious than that. Bakugo, several of your classmates point out that you have been bullying Midoriya for a long time," said the detective, to be nervously interrupted by the director. "No one has formally pointed it out, of course, but the police do not want to rule out some possibility." "Do you think it's my fault?" "My fault?" shouted Bakugo, making a threatening gesture with his hand, as if he were about to explode. The director shielded himself with his hands, somewhat intimidated by Bakugo's reaction, while the detective remained impassive next to him, despite not having a quirk. It was needless to mention that the hallways outside the office were filled with police officers and a couple of professional heroes. "I didn't do anything to Deku. I'm not a vulgar bully harassing others for being weaker than me." At that, the door opened wide, revealing Mitsuki Bakugo, his mother, who took great strides to reach her son and give him a slap. "Now that you did, Katsuki, there's always something with you. Can't you behave well once in your life?" If the director was intimidated by Bakugo, dealing with a mother like Mitsuki definitely terrified him. Mrs. Bakugo, we are interrogating your son regarding the disappearance of one of his classmates, Izuku Midoriya." He began to speak. As if by magic, the angry attitude towards his son changed to a serene gesture with the director. "Oh, if I found out, poor Inko, so obedient and well-behaved that he is his son, he gets pure 10s, he exclaimed, only to turn to his son Katsuki. "Instead of burning the notebooks, it was for you to borrow them, to see if you could improve your math grade." Surprised by the arrival of the young student, Detective Naomasa cleared his throat to get his attention. "Madam, I would be very grateful if you would avoid violent attitudes in my presence. We are only conducting an investigation." Mitsuki turned to the detective, with the same serene, worried face he had with the director. "Of course, detective. He has our full support for the research." Again going through his notes, the detective wrote a couple of lines about the case again. "Where was your son last Friday, between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m.? he asked. Mitsuki immediately took a thoughtful face. At 6 p.m., Katsuki was in the house. He was punished for scaring the neighbors' dogs with his explosions. As punishment, he had to clean the kitchen, the living room, and the garage. So he finished at 9 o'clock, 9:15 at the latest. His father arrived from work shortly before, so he watched him until dinner was over. At 9:30, we had dinner. Katsuki washed the dishes for his punishment, and at 10:30, he was already in his room. Mitsuki recounted. The detective took note of everything that happened, verifying his previous notes. Do you have an alibi? Didn't your son come out in the middle of the night without your consent? The detective asked. Sure, replied Mitsuki. My husband can testify. Plus the neighbors always know when we're home. You know, for disciplining my son, he continued, giving Katsuki an apprehensive look. The detective understood that the screaming in that house must have been a regular occurrence for the entire neighborhood. Anyway, can I go now? Bakugo asked, who had waited patiently to finish the interrogation. I had nothing to do with what happened. It wasn't my fault that he disappeared. Then tell your mother. The detective said. Everyone turned to look at him. Izuku Midoriya is at the station. I think it would be useful if you told him that you had nothing to do with it. Immediately, Bakugo lowered his head. If Izuku had really disappeared, or had been kidnapped, it would be a relief for his mother to know that he had not been responsible. Yes, I'll talk to her. They had all taken their seats when Aizawa had arrived in the hall. Very good, young people. First of all, I tell you that All Might gave me the results of yesterday's training exercise. I'll tell you shortly that their performance was decent, so they still have a lot to improve. At that, he turned to ZenAku. I would also like to remind you that these are training sessions. Obviously, we don't expect you to kill each other, but you should remember that working as a professional hero means facing off against all kinds of quirks, both dangerous and unpredictable. Although Katsuki Bakugo is the only one who remained in the infirmary, he will be with us for the second period. He assured them. At least that confirmed what Achiko had commented a few minutes ago. Anyway, there are a couple of things to discuss with you. First, there have been a couple of reported cases of reporters stalking UA students, especially now that All Might is professor. Aizawa said, pressing a button on the projector to show a couple of paparazzi and interviewer photos from the day before. Remember that you are not only student of the academy, you are also its representatives. Do not attack or be disrespectful to the press, unless you want your popularity to go off a cliff. After this, Aizawa pressed another button. Second, you won't have any hero training today, so you can use the time as it suits you. Tomorrow, however, we will have a somewhat different training session, led by myself, All Might, and another faculty member at a facility that is located off the UA campus. This time, instead of battle, the training will be about rescue. Natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, things like that. Rescue, huh? This will be an interesting exercise. Denki exclaimed. I'll finally be able to test my skills in the water. Ribbit celebrated to you. At last, a test that will separate boys from men, Ijiro said. I'm not done. Aizawa scolded them. Immediately, everyone fell silent. Finally, I need you to choose a class representative. I don't need to mention it, but for those interested in the position, it's a good way to get known for their leadership skills, and that can help them get jobs at hero agencies later on. ZenAku snorted, as he wasn't interested in participating in those kinds of classic school activities. While he had proven to be the strongest student in the class, he was still a lone wolf, not interested in the spotlight being on him, much less having leadership skills. Still, with his sense of hearing, he could sense a couple whispering his name to consider potential nominees. The rest of the day, classes continued their normal schedule. As Aizawa had remarked, by noon Bakugo appeared at the door of the room, fully recovered but absorbed in his thoughts. He gave ZenAku a contemptuous look, but he didn't say anything and went to his seat without much trouble. After lunchtime, the students went to the classroom to collect their things. Some go study in the library, and others to take advantage of the fact that the pool was available. ZenAku was ready to leave the campus, when suddenly Ijiro caught up with him. There you are, ZenAku, he greeted him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Hey, since we'll have the hour off, the invitation to go to gym is still open. You're coming, aren't you? Duke Orr began to mutter, But Aijiro wouldn't take no for an answer. Come on, man. It helps you with my series. He was going to go with Mizo Shoji, but he has to go and deliver school papers or something. I only brought my school uniform for the day, so I don't think. ZenAku tried to excuse himself, but Aijiro had already anticipated it. Don't worry. I can lend you a change of clothes. I think we're about the same size. He offered him, excited. ZenAku wanted to just get rid of him and leave school early, but something inside of him made him feel bad for being rude, especially after accepting him as he was. In that case, 15 minutes later, ZenAku emerged from the men's locker room, wearing the muscular shirt, baggy shorts, and pair of athletic sneakers that Aijiro had lent him, while Aijiro waited for him, doing stretching and calisthenics. Wow, thank goodness you did have it, the redhead commented, checking the wolf's toned body. Well on the move. If we hurry, we can use the best machines before the others arrive, he exclaimed, striking a rough pose before leaving the masked wolf with a look of confusion and annoyance before going after him. Meanwhile, in some bar in the city, a man was drinking while contemplating the day's newspaper. It was not an ordinary bar, but a clandestine bar that catered to a very particular clientele. Reading the paper, he came across a note about All Might being chosen as a faculty. The man, who gave off an evil aura, took a long swig of his drink. With what? The new generation of heroes is being trained by the P symbol. Huh? He placed his drink on the image of the hero, allowing the moisture from it to wet the paper and warp the image. Let's see what happens when the symbol of peace is extinguished and chaos predominates, the man threatened. Tomorrow will be a special day, without a doubt. Unlike regular schools, which prevent students from using their supernatural abilities freely and restrict them to life or death cases, UA encourages the development of each individual's quirk potential. Whether it's emission, transformation, or mutation quirks, the UA offers different types of training camps and specialized labs to measure the effects and effectiveness of each particular skill. However, as human beings, heroes in training must also undergo physical training in order to build endurance and agility that will be necessary when rescuing someone or fighting a villain. To this end, the physical fitness gymnasium had been built in one of the annexes, a facility with training equipment adjustable to the different sizes, abilities, and physical conditions of UA students. Similar to gyms in the rest of the city, there were countless exercise machines focused on different parts of the body, as well as barbells to lift weights, rubber bands, rowers, jump ropes, etc. Since they had left school early, Aijiro and ZenAku arrived at a nearly empty gym with a couple of girls on the treadmills and a third-year guy lifting a pair of dumbbells. Excellent. Everything is unoccupied. Are you going to do arms or legs? Aijiro asked him. ZenAku had no idea what he meant. He had gone with his partner out of courtesy, but he didn't understand why humans had to be so protocol when training, when they could well fight each other to see who was stronger. You can start your first. I'll see what to do. He finally answered. Well, you can help me with some bars? I usually start with 80 kg to warm up, Aijiro said, in the most humble way he could. But despite everything, it sounded like presumption. By the way, don't mind training with the mask? You know, by the breath. ZenAku snorted in frustration, but held back as much as he could. It doesn't bother me, he replied at the end, while following Aijiro, who had chosen a bench to lift benches, although I still don't understand why it bothers others. Aijiro had already settled into the bench when he straightened up, thinking that he had offended his partner. Oh, it doesn't bother me. In fact, you look pretty cool, he commented briefly, though he blushed slightly as he said it and settled back into the pew. Mizo Shoji also wears one all the time, and he says he's used to it by now. I see. ZenAku replied, settling on the other side of the bench to help Aijiro. Then I just have to watch that the weight doesn't fall on you? He asked. Well, something like that, and then we change if you want. Usually with my hardening quirk, I can lift and withstand much more weight than this, but I also want to strengthen my body without depending on my quirk. Aijiro answered and began to rise. At first it was difficult for him, but little by little he acclimatized to the weight. Then why don't you just use your quirk all the time? ZenAku asked, which was rare for him. For the first time, I was interested in the point of view of a quirk user, because huff, huff trap, Ijiro said between repetitions. With some effort, he managed to leave the bar on the stand to wipe the sweat with a towel. I'm not going to deny that my quirk gives me some advantage, but I must also learn to train my body to be stronger. At that, Ijiro got up from the bench to make room for ZenAku. Let's see, how much do you lift? The masked man did not know about weights and quantities. He only knew that in the forest he could uproot trees and carry them with one arm. He settled on the bench, while Ijiro positioned himself behind him and took the bar with both arms. Without much effort, he was able to lift the barbell, do a few repetitions, and return to the stand. More than this for sure, he replied at the end. Ijiro was impressed with how easily ZenAku could lift the bar. Oh, wow. Do you want to increase it? He offered, and after a few minutes, he had accommodated 100 kg more on each side. Again, ZenAku positioned himself and began to lift the bar, again, without exerting himself too much. Wow, awesome! He exclaimed again, barely believing what he saw. After a few repetitions, ZenAku put the huge weight down on the stand. This is useless, is all they have? The masked wolf growled. Instead of being frightened, Ijiro's eyes lit up. Ah, you want a challenge, huh? Come with me. He immediately invited him to follow him, go to a separate room. Reluctantly, ZenAku got up and followed. Being an institution where the study and training of quirks of all kinds was encouraged, the UA had exercise equipment for all kinds of needs, including super-strength quirks. Ijiro led ZenAku into an adjoining room, where there were hyperdense metal weights, which apparently resembled those inside. Let's see, try this one. Ijiro instructed, showing a block of metal decorated with an almighty sticker. ZenAku approached the block, thinking of lifting it with one hand, but no matter how hard he tried, the block would not get up. He had to use both hands to lift the block, which barely lifted him a couple of inches off the ground. According to the label, the block weighed just over a ton. For his part, Ijiro was enthusiastic. Wow! I had never managed to lift it, he exclaimed, while ZenAku dropped the huge block. It's actually a super dense cement block, made especially for quirks of excessive strength. Did you know that weight is the one All Might uses to train? For his part, the masked man only grunted under his breath and tried again. Placing both hands on the grips, ZenAku lifted the block again, using all his strength, highlighting his hardened biceps covered in fur. This time, he managed to lift the block a couple of inches more before dropping it again. So, this is the strength of hero number 1. Huh? I can easily get through it, he growled maliciously as he tried to lift the block again. Well, but come on, you're not going to get strong all of a sudden, are you? Asked the other guy. That doesn't matter. Soon my powers will be maxed out, and... Then ZenAku stopped. He realized that he was revealing too much information about his powers. You know, bro, don't be in a hurry. Maybe you've already proven that you're much stronger than I expected. Ijiro exclaimed, leaving the huge block behind, to use the usual training equipment. ZenAku followed him with his gaze, while clenching his fists in frustration. If he wanted to defeat All Might, he still had a long way to go. Both ZenAku and Ijiro continued to train for an hour, using the gym's different specialized equipment and instruments. Although ZenAku at first thought that the training would be futile, by the time they were done the werewolf was covered in sweat and panting loudly. Wow, very good workout. I'm exhausted, Ijiro exclaimed, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a towel. Hey, ZenAku, thank you so much for coming. I really had a blast, he said, patting him on the shoulder. ZenAku noticed the gesture, but decided to ignore it. Yes, of course, whatever. He didn't want to admit it out loud, but he had actually enjoyed exercising and testing how strong he was. Still, he felt he had to thank him for something. Thank you for lending me your training clothes. It's comfortable. Oh, sure, no problem, Ijiro said, visibly blushing, as they reached the locker room to gather their things. Maybe if you want, you can return it to me later. ZenAku nodded his head as he grabbed his uniform from the locker. Good. See you tomorrow, he said suddenly. heading for the door as soon as possible. "Hey, are you leaving?" asked Ijiro, surprised by the suddenness of his departure. "Well, it's okay. See you tomorrow." He said goodbye, then adding to annoyance, "Although you should take a bath. You smell like a wet dog." "What did you say?" ZenAku turned around, but Ijiro had already gone to the showers. He grunted under his breath. Although he understood that Ijiro had done it was to make him react, it also meant that his classmate had taken confidence in him. Undecided about feeling good about it, ZenAku headed to the gates of the school, although not before raising an arm and sniffing his hairy armpit to check its bad smell. Meanwhile, as he stepped out of the showers and changed into casual clothes, Ijiro made his way to the UA exit when one of his classmates approached from the side. "Hey, Fumikage, I didn't know you were still in school." Fumikage turned to him. "How are you, Ijiro? I'll still accompany you to the exit," he replied as the two walked at the same level. "By the way, how'd it go at the gym?" "Oh, it was excellent. Thank you so much for the suggestion to invite ZenAku. It was pretty cool." Ijiro celebrated with 2 thumbs up. "Although I insist that you should also go to exercise from time to time, without offending, but those chicken feet of yours would make you tone up a little more." "It's not my kind of training," the young crows had replied. "In addition, I had other matters to attend to." "So," he said, abruptly changing the subject, "what do you think of ZenAku? Do you think there's something weird about him?" "Not at all," Ijiro answered. "I guess it's just a secretive thing, but it's cool. Maybe in his past school, he didn't have many friends." "It may be. But besides that, he didn't say anything out of the ordinary?" Fumikage asked, hoping not to sound too nosy. Ijiro was a little suspicious of his classmates' interest, although it was understandable since they were just getting to know each other. "Well," Ijiro began to answer, scratching his red hair. "He just commented that he didn't like being asked about his mask, although you should have seen it. That wolf is quite powerful. He lifted All Might's training block like a full-fledged male." Then it looks like it's quite strong." Fumikage commented, "I could easily lift a ton if I keep training." In addition, according to him, he says that in a few days he will reach the maximum of his power. Most likely he is very confident too. Ijiro began to tell him, but Fumikage interrupted him. "Wait, to be at the top of its power? In a few days? What did he mean by that?" Fumikage asked. It was a peculiar enough detail to mention so lightly. "I have no idea, but he did say that in a few days it was going to reach its full potential," Ijiro said, shrugging. By this time, both of them had already crossed the threshold of the academy. The last rays of the sun were already on the horizon, and the moon was beginning to shine in the sky. Then Fumikage realized that the moon in the sky was in a waxing phase. "It will be possible," he commented quietly. "Somehow, I knew the moon was important, but why?" "Well, nice to see you, Kirishima. I have a couple of things to review. See you tomorrow." Fumikage said goodbye, running to the nearby train station to go home. "Oh, sure." That was the only thing Ijiro managed to answer while he turned to walk home. Wow, everyone is in a hurry lately. The next day, ZenAku was on his way to school. His muscles were still burning from the previous day's exercise, so he decided to walk the last stretch before reaching the entrance, carrying in one hand a bag of the clothes Ijiro had lent him the day before. But just before arriving, he bumped into a large group of journalists with microphones in hand, who were interviewing Ochako. "And tell us, what is it like to work with the peace symbol in person?" asked the journalist. Somewhat shy, her partner tried to answer. How is it? Well, he's super muscular, yes." Meanwhile, on the other side, another journalist was questioning Ida. "His leadership and dedication remind us daily that we are attending one of the most important academies in the country. Of course, he is the embodiment of honor and integrity." ZenAku rolled his eyes. He loathed the media and the press, who were quick to put heroes on unattainable pedestals solely because of their status and powers. He tried to go around them, but almost immediately one of the cameramen discovered him, due to his uniform, and in a short time they headed towards him. "Hey, are you a student at the UA? Can we ask you a few questions?" One of the reporters said, surprising ZenAku, and being flanked by cameramen and photographers around him. We need you to tell us, what's it like to have All Might as a teacher? Slowly, the masked man turned to a reporter, and with a calm but threatening tone, he replied, "It is not something of the interest of the public how he teaches us. Tabloid and opportunistic journalists like you should pursue something more productive." He responded, try and push them out of his way, but none of them moved. "Do they teach them to be disrespectful to their elders?" The reporter replied scathingly. "Do you think you need to hire someone more severe to build your character?" ZenAku was about to respond when Aizawa appeared at the gate of the compound. "Very well, it's all over. All the students in room 1A, please come in," he said, pointing to ZenAku. "As for the rest, the UA school is private property. I'll have to ask them to leave." The boys, along with ZenAku, made their way inside the school, following Aizawa. "I don't understand how All Might manages to do his hero job with all the press on his cape." "Hey, we're just doing our job," said the reporter, who tried to follow the students inside the campus. But as soon as he set foot inside, a loud alarm went off, activating the defense system. A large metal wall was erected out of nowhere, while the school door was slammed shut. "What the hell was that?" exclaimed the reporter, who had fallen to the ground from the sudden fright. "Don't you know? It is the UA's defense system. It is the latest in technology." A cameraman who worked with her answered, "Designed to not let anyone in who doesn't have an entry pass or student card." "Well, how rude. They should give us at least one interview." The reporter replied, annoyed. "What a waste of time. We will leave here without having obtained any information." A few meters from where the press was, there was a pale individual with white hair and black clothes who watched as the media dispersed. Seeing the school's defense system, he smiled ominously. "We'll see each other, UA Academy." Upon arriving at the classroom, Aizawa made his way to the classroom. "Well, as we had agreed before, today they have to elect a representative. They have 1 hour to decide who or how the representative will be elected. Remember that it is important to choose someone who will help you for the rest of the school year." "Choose me. I want to be a representative," Ijiro said. "I will," Denki Kaminari replied. "Sure, why not?" commented Kyoka Jiro. "Someone with style like—" Yuga Aoyama began, only to be interrupted by Mina Aishido. "I am the best choice." "Wait a minute." Ida Tenya interrupted them all. "This is an important election. It's not just about choosing a popular person, but someone who can lead others. It has to be someone that others trust. And that's why I propose that we make a democratic election." "I don't know if it's the best idea," Denki questioned. "Ribbit, how will we know who to vote for? We have only known each other for a few days. We should propose candidates, and then everyone should vote for the candidates they like the most, right?" In that case, I propose ZenAku as a group representative." Ijiro exclaimed from his seat. ZenAku, who was not interested in politics, was absorbed in his thoughts when he heard Kirishima's voice. "Wait, what?" A few minutes later, the votes were written down on the blackboard. Surprisingly, ZenAku had received 5 votes, 2 for Momo Yaoyorozu, and the rest of the candidates with 1 vote, including Ida, who had only received 1 vote for him. "Hell, I fear that would happen, but I can't argue against the system I proposed," muttered Ida, trembling. "Great. ZenAku will be a good class representative." Ijiro celebrated. "MMH, I guess it's better than nothing," Shoto commented. The only 3 who did not comment on the matter were ZenAku himself, who was speechless, Tokoyami, who only observed what happened from his seat, and Bakugo, who suddenly banged his desk in frustration. "Very good. Why did they vote for the lapdog?" he shouted defiantly. Since the training match, Bakugo had not wanted to face his teammates. Did you think we would vote for you, Katsuki?" asked Hanashiro. "Well, we only voted for the one we wanted to win, nothing more," Achiko said, blushing slightly, though it was very obvious who she had voted for. At that, ZenAku stood up and walked in front of the class. "I thought Ida had commented that this would not be a popularity contest. So why did they vote for me?" Everyone was silent. until Denki raised his hand. Hey, is what Ijiro says true? That you were able to lift All Might's training block at the gym? Wow, that huge block. Rigito Sato asked, astonished. Even I with my sugar rush couldn't move that thing. Impossible, Mizo Shoji said. I never thought that a first-class person could lift that thing. Is that what he meant? So... Fumikic turned to look up at the sky, checking the crescent moon. That has no relevance at all. ZenAku grunted in disapproval. The fact that I can or cannot do certain things by my power does not mean that I am or am not a good leader, much less that I can be a hero, but you have to admit it. You're the most powerful freshman. Minoru Mineta responded. With all those weird things you do, and the thing about your sword, and also the highest score on the exam. Mashireo Ojiro recalled. That's right. If you keep it up, you could be one of the best students in the school. Ijiro added. You might even be better than All Might when you graduate, and... Enough! Growled ZenAku, slamming his fist on his desk, shattering it. This has nothing to do with power or strength. It's like they haven't listened to Ida. He said, turning to his classmate. It's not about how strong you are. It's about what you can do with that power in your hands. You could have a complex and advanced quirk or a simple and seemingly useless one. But who you are is what really counts. Everyone remained silent. Aizawa, who had taken a nap while her students decided, woke up to the uproar. ZenAku, what does that mean? And what happened to your desk? I'm sorry, Professor. I lost my temper. ZenAku apologized. I don't think I'm the best candidate to be a group representative. Hearing that, Aizawa scratched his head in frustration. Your teammates chose you. Whether it was because of competition or fame, now you are the representative of the class. Anyway, we don't have time to discuss it anymore. Then, he turned to the rest of the students. Everyone go change into your hero costumes. We have to go to the specialized training ground in less than half an hour, he said, and headed for the door. The other students did the same, except for Ida, who stayed behind to talk to ZenAku. You have a minute before you go, he pointed out, making a kind of robotic gesture. I thank you very much for your words, but if it's of any use, you could be a great group representative. On the contrary, someone as organized and passionate as you would be better suited for the position. ZenAku replied, in fact, I was the one who voted for you in the election. If you don't mind, I'll give you the position. What? No, no, no. Ida immediately refused, gesturing exaggeratedly with her hands. Although I think everything will depend on how we do in office. Ida said, patting him on the shoulder, I'm definitely going to give my best. See you on the bus. Half an hour later, all the students arrived at the training ground, wearing their hero costumes. ZenAku had already changed into his dark armor and was ready for the exercise. I was waiting for you, Class 1A. They were all greeted by a superheroine in a large astronaut suit. Wow, it's 13. He's my favorite pro hero. Ochako said, excited. Their specialty is in rescues. I really admire her very much. Thank you very much, young lady. Now, please follow me. He told them. All Might had to leave due to an emergency, but he will arrive shortly. In the meantime, Professor Aizawa and I will take care of the exercise. Aizawa muttered under his breath, wow, how irresponsible All Might. He always does things like this. Fuck, it looks like an amusement park. Denki commented, a stranded ship, an avalanche, a fire, a storm. I have created this training space to simulate all kinds of disasters, so that you can practice using your quirks to rescue those who are in trouble due to natural disasters. I call it the Junior Life-Saving Unit, or USJ for short. 13 announced excitedly. Sounds like Universal Studios Japan. They all commented in unison. Well, first of all, Professor Aizawa told me about his evaluations of quirks, and I must admit that they have amazing abilities. 13 mentioned. For those who don't know, my quirk is called Black Hole. It's an ability that absorbs all kinds of matter and turns it into dust. As you can see, it's a pretty useful quirk, and at the same time, quite deadly. But just because they have a quirk with offensive applications doesn't mean they can't use it to perform a successful rescue. They must not forget that their powers can be dangerous if they use them carelessly or if they are not focused on what they do. Moving forward among the students, 13 continued her explanation. The quirk evaluation test helped them validate the limit of their quirks, and the All Might combat drill showed them how effective their quirks can be against other people. For this exercise, it is strictly forbidden to use your quirks to attack each other or anyone else, just to help. Aizawa then addressed the group. All right, the first thing we're going to do, but his sentence was interrupted when the lights of the enclosure began to flicker, and a few meters away, a strange dark portal appeared out of nowhere. All of the students wondered if that would be part of the training, but ZenAku immediately felt that something bad was happening, as if the air around him had become denser. Instinctively, he summoned his crescent sword, which surprised a couple of students near him. The portal grew larger and larger, until suddenly the students could make out a figure making its way through the shadows, a kind of demented face, covered by a chilling hand, looking at them all with bloodshot eyes. All of the students in Class 1A stood motionless, while 100 individuals passed through the dark portal. All of them had an intimidating appearance, but the guy who had come out first actually gave off an aura of indescribable evil. Wow! Is this part of the training? Oh! Aijiro began to say, but as soon as he tried to take a step forward, Professor Aizawa stopped him in his tracks. Stay where you are. This is not part of the drill. Those are real villains, he ordered seriously. He had taken a pair of strange yellow glasses and put them on. Now he was no longer his master. Now he was Eraserhead, the professional hero, preparing for the worst. The whole class was frightened, but they obeyed to the letter. Meanwhile, taking advantage of his wolf-like vision, ZenAku hadn't taken his eyes off the one who seemed to be the leader of the group. He was in his mid-20s, skinny pale, and with greasy white hair. In addition to a simple black suit, he was wearing a set of severed hands that held his arms, neck, and head, with one of them covering his face. Behind him, a huge creature materialized, a monster with bruised skin with large scars and bulging eyes, whose skull exposed its brain. The monster advanced a couple of steps, until the pale man raised his arm and signaled him to stop. Only Eraserhead and 13 are found in the building. A deep voice came from inside the portal, which began to reform and took the form of a man made of the same dark material as the portal. Based on the schedule we got from the UA, All Might should be here. Damn you! They surely used the press to be able to sneak away, concluded Eraserhead. Well, where is he? The pale man asked. I brought a few friends to meet the great symbol of peace. I can't believe I'm not here, although I wonder how fast it would get there if we started killing some of the children. He hinted in a sinister tone. Eraserhead took the threat seriously and immediately prepared for combat, releasing constriction tapes around his neck. I will be in charge of distracting the villains. 13, you must escort them to the exit. They have to go to a safe place until the other professional heroes arrive. Nodding, 13 extended an arm to protect the students, while Aizawa descended towards the main square, where the villains were located. But I don't understand. Denki said, the alarm is supposed to sound, isn't it? Why hasn't any hero arrived yet? They sure found a way to break into the security service. Momo added, if they really want All Might, it means they chose this particular place to catch him. ZenAku looked once more towards the central square. The pal and the giant monster were in the central square, while the other villains began to disperse. Using intuition from past battles, he was able to guess what the villains' intentions were. The villains don't seem to be particularly strong, but they are numerous. If they're scattering, chances are they're not going to fight All Might, but with us. Wait, how do you know? Ida asked. They brought several types of quirks. If this was an invasion or a military attack, they would prefer to bring in a squad of few villains with powerful quirks, considering the different terrains, and that they do not know our skills. They are going to try to separate us and attack. They'll use us as a distraction so they can attack All Might. ZenAku concluded. Who else but him would know about that strategy, given that he himself proposed it thousands of years ago in battle? ZenAku is right. In that case, at most the three of them would be the most dangerous to deal with. Shoto commented, but as he pointed out, he realized that only the pail and the monster were in the square. Wait, the other one is missing. Where is the monster in the portal? In fact, my name is Kurojiri, and I will be the one who will take care of you. They all turn around, realizing that a portal had appeared between them and the escape door. Again, the portal took on a humanoid form. We're the League of Villains, and we'll make sure this is the site of All Might's last battle. They all got into an attacking position, though 13 still stood between them and Kurojiri. You won't do anything to these young people, villain. You'll have to step over me, he declared, pointing a finger at him, activating his quirk. Immediately, a huge vortex began to absorb the villain, sucking him up and turning him into dust. Momo approached Ida, trying to draw as little attention as possible. Ida, if communication is turned off, we need one of us to go and alert the pro heroes. Do you think you can run to the door? Wait, me? He asked in surprise. Although his quirk allowed him to run at high speeds, he wasn't sure he could reach the door without being caught by Kurojiri. I could try, but I don't know how long 13 can take. They both turned to the heroine, who kept absorbing the villain. But no matter how hard she tried, she remained alert to his movements. I already thought about that. We need 2 people to distract him in case he tries to attack you. Bakugo Kirishima. Momo turned to the 2 heroes. If 13 can't stop him, I need the 2 of you to attack him at all costs. That will give Ida time to escape. Sure, count on that, Ijiro said, stiffening both arms. Don't give me orders, Bakugo replied angrily, but he's still prepared to attack. We need someone to cover them. ZenAku, you could... Wait, where's ZenAku? They turned around, but their companion had disappeared. Just then, Kurojiri would open a portal behind 13's back, causing his vortex attack to damage the back of her suit, knocking her unconscious. That will take care of you. Now, as for the young people, Kurojiri mentioned, but just then, Ijiro and Katsuki headed to attack him, and they did nothing to him. Wait, we didn't make a scratch to him. Ijiro was frightened, while Achiko, who was watching, noticed an armor plate behind the glow of Katsuki's explosion. How naive to believe that they could do anything to me, but now it's time to send them to their doom. Kurojiri expanded, generating a gigantic mass of darkness that enveloped the youngsters. But before he could teleport them, one of the villains fell near him, apparently having been thrown from the square, full of blows and bleeding. But what a demo! Was what Kurojiri managed to mumble. Momo took advantage of Kurojiri's brief lapse of concentration to shout at Ida, "Now!" which caused Ida to get into position and activate her quirk, running at full speed toward the entrance. Where do you think you're going? Kurojiri shouted, chasing Ida toward the door. Despite his speed, the villain moved quickly, like a shadow, and slowly approached his position. He was about to catch it, when Ochako jumped after the monster. "Let's see what happens if something happens to your armor," he shouted, as he activated his quirk, and touched a piece of armor with his fingers. Kurojiri was beginning to levitate. Despite being mostly intangible, his physical form depended on that armor. "No!" "What are you doing?" shouted Kurojiri, but it was too late. Ida had managed to reach the door of the USJ, pulling on the handle with all her might to open the door and give the cry of alarm. While all this was happening, Aizawa arrived at the entrance of the central square, where a couple of villains headed to attack him. At that, he activated his quirk, preventing a pair of tentacles made of hair from attacking him, and stopping a four-armed thug with the ribbons around his neck. Wow. The professional hero eraser head, commented the Pale. I hate it when professional heroes live at the level of their fame. A great fighter, with several tricks up his sleeve, and his glasses make it impossible to tell who his quirk is disabling from. This will be a problem. Suddenly, he began to scratch his neck impatiently, but he stopped. Luckily, their power is useless if there is more than one combatant. Having defeated the top three, a group of 7 villains headed towards him with their quirks activated. He was ready to face them when, suddenly, a pair of stone hands came out of the ground, pinning him down. As he looked down, he was hit by a direct blow from another of the villains. Before long, several were kicking him on the ground, sending his glasses flying a couple feet away. Just as they were about to deliver a lethal blow, A shadow of energy rose into the air, descending swiftly towards the villains. With impressive speed, he attacked the 7 villains around Aizawa, then went to his feet and slashed the 8th, who was a mole-like villain. "I told you to go with the others." Aizawa scolded his student, but he ignored her, heading towards the albino villain. "Wow, we have an extra character." The skinny villain stared at him from head to toe, confused by his sinister appearance. "Surely you didn't come with us?" "I brought so many villains that I lost count." ZenAku straightened up, grabbing his sword and resting on his shoulder. "My name is ZenAku, the Wolf Duke Org. If you know what is good for you, you will leave this compound and willingly surrender yourself, you and your minions." He threatened him, staring him in the eye. Intimidated, but intrigued by the masked man, he also returned his gaze. "Oh, it sounds like we're too confident, huh? Why should I listen to you? Hero?" The villain replied in a mocking tone. "For your little army is nothing compared to my power." ZenAku said, maintaining the threatening tone. "I guess you'd like to give me a demonstration, right?" The villain asked in a raspy voice. He didn't even have to shout or move his hands. All the villains who were focused on Aizawa were now staring at ZenAku. "Kill him." Sentenced. "As you wish." Rising wave. ZenAku shouted, charging energy into his sword and quickly brandishing it towards his enemies. He quickly fired an energy attack that impacted several of the villains around him, knocking them out. One by one, the villains in the square began to attack him, but ZenAku grabbed onto his sword and attacked them left and right, one by one. No matter how much they attacked him and hit his armor, the only thing the villains' weapons achieved was to spark at the contact of ZenAku's armor. "No, ZenAku, stop!" Aizawa ordered his student, but the masked man continued to slash villains who approached him. He tried to activate his quirk on him, but despite that, ZenAku was able to launch a powerful energy attack from his sword that sent flying 5 villains next to him. "No, I can't stop it." The villains who were scattering around the compound decided to regroup to confront ZenAku, but one by one he gave chase. At that, a villain with a muscular body and long horns tried to ram him, but he stopped him with only one arm. Resting his boots tightly on the ground, ZenAku gathered momentum and threw the villain upwards, causing him to fall right behind his companions, who were dealing with Kurogiri. By now, several unconscious villains were on the ground, and the few left standing were unsure between attacking or surrendering. One of them tried to run away, but ZenAku extended one of his arms, attacking him with a powerful beam coming out of his fingers, electrocuting the unfortunate villain. This is not going according to plan," the pale villain said, scratching his neck violently. ZenAku simply turned around and raised his sword in his direction. At that moment, Kurogiri appeared behind him. "Shigaraki, we have problems." One of the students managed to escape. Surely he is on his way to alert. What the hell happened here? He interrupted himself mid-sentence, noticing all the villains around him. "That doesn't matter. Damn, the plan is ruined." "It ruins everything," snarled Shigaraki, scratching more intensely. "This should not have been like this. Damn you, All Might. And you, ZenAku, you're going to pay me back." "Sounds like we're too confident, doesn't it?" ZenAku coldly replied, repeating the villain's words. "How long did it take you to get these villains together?" 3 for weeks. And it took me less than 10 minutes to hunt down more than 90 of them. Again, ZenAku pointed toward Shigaraki. "Last chance to give up. You don't know who you're up against." "Damn idiot," Shigaraki said, bending down and touching the ground with his outstretched hand. Suddenly, the entire ground cracked, causing ZenAku to lose his balance temporarily. As he tried to rejoin, Shigaraki ran towards his direction with his hand outstretched, but the masked man was already waiting for him, crouching down and kicking Shigaraki in the sternum to fly him backwards. "Nice try, Shigaraki, but not enough, I'm afraid." ZenAku raised his sword in order to attack him on the ground, but just before his sword made contact, a huge purple arm stood in his way, bearing the blade of the sword in his huge and thick skin. Before he could react, the huge monster gave him a strong blow to the abdomen, which sent him flying a few meters backwards. "Ha! Did you think I would be the final boss?" Very bad. Shigaraki sneered, backing up until he was behind the monster, who dislodged Crescent Sword from his arm, as if it were an annoying splinter. ZenAku watched in amazement that the monster didn't bleed as much as it should have a wound of that size, and that the pit that he had cut little by little was regenerating, until it left no trace. This creature in front of you is the ultimate in genetics. We call it Nomu, Shigaraki explained. It's the final weapon against All Might, but it looks like he'll have to defeat an annoying sub-boss first. With impressive speed and strength, the Nomu headed towards ZenAku, who was barely able to get up and dodge the attack. Very good. Time to use strong cards. Again, it turned a purple shadow and attacked the Nomu at full speed, but the Nomu stopped him in his tracks with one hand and threw him away, causing him to crash into one of the nearby buildings, before falling to the ground. Squeezing his sword into the floor, ZenAku rejoined. He attacked again, making several cuts with his sword, but no matter how much he attacked him, the Nomu remained standing, did not react to pain, and ZenAku's cuts healed quickly. ZenAku gasped for a moment, trying to think of a strategy, looking at the Nomu that was slowly heading towards him. No mercy was all he said, his eyes shining brightly. He charged energy towards the sword, pointing towards a huge monster. Wolf Fong, he exclaimed, and at full speed he shot towards the Nomu, with his sword in front of him, and landing on the other side. After a few seconds, a long cut line was drawn on the Nomu's arm, which separated cleanly and fell to the ground a few seconds later. Wow, impressive, Shigaraki admitted, clapping his hands slowly. You truly exceed my expectations, hero. But do you think he would have done all this, that he would have carried out this plan, if he wasn't sure that Nomu would be powerful enough to kill All Might? Undeterred, the huge Nomu stood in front of ZenAku, stretched the stem of his arm to the side, and in a matter of seconds a new huge arm grew, exactly the same size and shape as the previous one. The Nomu can absorb all the attacks you make, and at the same time, it can regenerate any limb you might rip off from it. Shigaraki sneered. ZenAku grunted in frustration. Despite having met different orgs, he had never seen a monster with such advanced regenerative ability. Was it a new kind of human-made org? He again charged energy into his sword, rushing towards a huge monster at full speed. The first attack cut off his right arm, the second his left hand, and a third managed to cut him in half, separating his legs from the rest of his body. Again, the lost limbs regenerated in a matter of seconds. This is impossible. Shigaraki laughed madly. You can try as many times as you want. His regeneration quirk is one of the most advanced in the entire high end, he exclaimed. But I'm getting bored. Nomu, subdue him. The giant Nomu only roared and sped to where ZenAku stood, punching him, then another and another. Suddenly, one of the Nomu's punches sent him flying into the air, and another of them sent him plummeting toward the ground, creating a powerful impact that left a crater of considerable size. The use of energy, added to the blows he had suffered, had left ZenAku exhausted and vulnerable, breathing heavily behind the mask. However, as he turned up, he noticed that the Nomu was moving more slowly. After all, the creature had a limit, and it had already consumed a large amount by regenerating the arms and legs it had cut off. He would eventually run out of energy, and a simple attack could knock him down. However, ZenAku was also at the limit of its capacity. He was tired, dejected, and a few drops of blood were dripping down his armor. If only the attack had happened in a few more days, the full moon would be in the sky, and he would be at the height of his power. At that, he felt a huge foot on his back. El Nomu was holding him crushed on the ground. His armor protected him against the monster's enormous pressure, but he was effectively immobilized. Very good. I think there's nowhere to run. ZenAku, I must admit. Shigaraki cleared his throat, approaching the wolf. That the mission was a failure, but the battle was quite intriguing. He bent down so he could look the wolf straight in the eye. Still, I feel like I should teach you a lesson, so you don't forget who I am, so that all of you know about the League of Villains and what we can do. ZenAku tried to break free, but it was useless. He turned up and saw Shigaraki's outstretched hand heading toward him. I think I should take that ridiculous horn off your forehead. You look like a unicorn. For a moment, ZenAku was terrified, feeling Shigaraki's four fingers encircle his horn to join the fifth, and nothing happened. ZenAku's horn remained where it always was. Shigaraki's insane gesture changed to one of frustration. Why can't I destroy it? The answer came in the form of constriction tapes, tying him by the neck and arms. It was Eraserhead, who had recovered from the previous attack. You better leave my student alone, Shigaraki. Of course, I have forgotten about you. Shigaraki replied, scratching his neck slightly. He touched the tapes with his hand to destroy them, but at that moment Aizawa kicked him in the jaw that knocked him down on his back. Ha! Now you feel free to attack me, right? But you should be more careful with your contact attacks. If you don't want to have an accident. Aizawa launched a second attack at him, this time hitting his ribs. But Shigaraki had managed to counter the attack, and in the brief instant that eye contact between the two was lost, Shigaraki touched his elbow briefly with his hand, disintegrating the sleeve of his clothes and unraveling the skin of his elbow. Shigaraki was badly wounded, and his breathing was shortened, but he maintained the same arrogant attitude, while Aizawa watched his elbow become red-hot, bleeding profusely. Good. Hero, it seems that we will end up killing each other, doesn't it? At that moment, Aizawa was the one who smiled. Not really. I just wanted to buy a few more seconds. It was the noise of the door being knocked down at that moment that proved the professional hero right. A tall, muscular figure, wearing a simple office suit and stylized blonde hair, had entered the USJ. ZenAku, who was still immobilized, knew who it was. All Might. Shigaraki whispered, "There's no need to fear. Do you know why?" The hero said, with a look of contained rage that had never been seen before, contrasting with his heroic smile. "Why am I here? After all the waiting..." Finally, that piece of garbage arrived, Shigaraki said. He hadn't even finished speaking when the peace symbol descended at full speed, separating Shigaraki from Aizawa, who was badly injured but standing. "I'm sorry for the delay, buddy." "Don't worry," Aizawa said, trying to cover his badly injured arm. "Very good. I think it's finally time for them to take care of you, All Might. Nomu, you know what to do," Shigaraki ordered. Suddenly, the monster lifted its enormous weight off ZenAku's shoulders and lunged at the hero, who was already waiting for him with a clenched fist. ZenAku slowly sat up, and Aizawa made her way towards him. "Are you all right, boy? We have to go." She held out her hand to him, but he refused it. "I can still fight. I'm fine." This time, Aizawa looked him straight in the eye. He wasn't using his quirk, but the professor's gaze was quite intimidating. "I saw what you can do, but I also saw the beating that Nomu gave you. You may have internal bleeding," he said. "Being strong also means knowing your limits and know when to retire. Let All Might take care of it." Meanwhile, the Nomu and All Might were locked in an intense battle. Although the Nomu had been made to withstand All Might's blows to the best of its ability, the monster was already exhausted from the fight against ZenAku. It didn't take him much work to wear out the Nomu's energy, which was getting slower and slower, and it took longer to regenerate. "And this is the best they have? Did they want to defeat me with this?" Almighty asked, who didn't look tired in the least. The blows between the two were so intense that a great air impulse almost sent ZenAku and Aizawa flying, while Shigaraki and Kurojiri took a safe distance from the battle. "Time to end this," Almighty declared, loading all his energy into a fist. "Going further? Plus ultra," he shouted at the top of his lungs, delivering the Nomu a blow so hard that it was impossible to absorb the impact, sending it flying at high speed, past the USJ's dome and disappearing into the sky. Shigaraki trembled with anger, while All Might headed towards them. Needless to say, their pathetic plan to finish me off was a failure. They better give up. It's their last chance. "You in what army?" Shigaraki asked defiantly, who rushed towards All Might, trying to attack him with his bare hands, but shot in the distance pierced his hand, stopping him in his tracks. ZenAku could see what was happening. The other professional heroes had arrived as reinforcements. One of them, Snipe, was the one who had shot Shigaraki, also immobilizing him with a couple of accurate shots to the legs. Some heroes began to descend into the square, while others went to help the students and others to hunt down the villains that were scattered. Shigaraki, we must make an immediate withdrawal. Kurogyari motioned to him at once. Scratching profusely, Shigaraki pointed his finger at the muscular blonde hero. Listen to me, All Might. Your days are numbered when you least expect it. Kurogyari expanded into a huge purple portal, behind which Shigaraki slowly vanished. Before entering the portal completely, he cast a contemptuous glance at ZenAku, who was holding his ribcage in pain. At last the ravages of battle were catching up with him. And you and I have something pending, he said, before disappearing into the doorway. Several miles away, in a speakeasy, Shigaraki landed on the wooden floor, while Kurogyari resumed his physical form. I'm hurt. The captured henchman. We lost Nomu. This was a fucking failure. Shigaraki gasped angrily. And All Might, still as strong as always. You were wrong, Maestro, he growled in protest at the television that was on the bar counter. We just weren't prepared as we should be. A voice from the television answered that he did not show any image to him. We underestimated the hero, but it won't happen again. And what happened to Nomu? We lost it. Kurogyari admitted Kurogyari. All Might took him flying, and without knowing his exact coordinates, I can't teleport him back. Unacceptable. After all the work put into making it as strong as All Might, a second voice said, different from the first, it wasn't our fault. Everything was going well until that damn guy appeared, the one with the wolf mask. Because of him, Nomu couldn't defeat All Might. Oh, the voice behind the screen asked. Was there interference from some professional hero that we don't know about? No, he was not a professional. He was one of the almighty students. It was a kind of wolf with black armor and a horn on its forehead and a long curved sword. He defeated almost all the henchmen who were with us and gave Nomu a long battle and... But then, the man's voice interrupted him. Wait, do you happen to know what his name was? I'm never going to forget his damn name. That ZenAku is going to pay me back. The television was silent for a few seconds. ZenAku, it's a name you don't hear every day. Kurogyari, I need you to be with Shigaraki and treat his wounds to the best of your ability. As for ZenAku, I need you to get as much information as you can about him. But, Master, what do you mean by that? Shigaraki asked alarmed. You'll see in due time. If my suspicions are correct, we may have an ace up our sleeve. One that not even All Might suspects. For now, Tamir Shigaraki, recover your wounds and assemble an elite of villains. The next time we attack, society will learn to fear the League. Following the instructions of their teachers, the students of Class 1A went outside. Outside the USJ building, a caravan of ambulances stood ready to tend to the wounded, along with police trucks and patrol cars, ready to control the situation and transport all the villains who had been defeated safely. With the help of professional heroes of the UA Academy, the police officers managed to handcuff and line up each and every one of the villains, or at least those who remained conscious and in a state of walking. Others were not so lucky, having to be transferred on stretchers to be cured before being sent to prison. Well, we finished checking every inch of the building, said researcher Tsukachi, who had been sent to deal with the disaster of the invasion of the USJ. It seems that none of you received any serious injuries, which is a relief. I think it's best for them to go back to campus and rest, although I'm going to ask them to give their statement later. It seemed that we were saved by a miracle, said Ojiro. Well, I saw that you fought pretty well. Hakagear encouraged him. Yes, they mess with the wrong young people. Kirishima exclaimed. Detective, wait. Tio said, jumping up to where the researcher stood. What happened to Professor Aizawa? And how does 13 continue? His teacher is being treated at the moment. He has a couple broken ribs, a broken arm, and the skin on his elbow is undone, but nothing serious. 13 suffered a few lacerations to her back, but she will recover in a short time. The detective commented. Wait, and what happened to ZenAku? We didn't see him go out with us. Achiko asked, worried. Tokoyami turned around at that moment, intrigued. Ah, you're talking about the guy in armor? Don't worry, they're taking care of it too. But we have to ask him a few questions about the person who led the attack. the investigator replied. At that moment, an officer arrived behind him. "Sir," greeted Officer Tamakua, who had the head of a cat, "we have news. We just found a creature that fell a few miles from here. It is the same one that, according to the testimonies of the UA professors, fought for Shigaraki a few minutes ago. For the moment he is calm and obeys the orders of the police. But we must question him immediately." "Okay," the investigator replied. "As for you young men, for the moment go to your living room, while we settle this whole matter," he ordered. As it was already a bit late, neither of them decided to object, and they headed for the main building of the campus. "You see? That officer had the head of a cat. How cute," Aishido exclaimed. "It's amazing that they've still found that monster alive, don't you think?" Kaminari mentioned. "You're right. After All Might's powerful punches, I thought I'd end up mashed." Kirishima added, "It was either that or it flew out into the stratosphere." You're right." Yuga Aoyama nodded, forcing a French accent. "In especial after ZenAku fights that thing." "Wait. What are you talking about?" asked Tokoyami, who usually preferred to listen from afar than participate in an argument. "I was busy fighting other villains in the USJ. Believe it or not," Kaminari exclaimed. "I was fighting a couple of villains in the Rocky area, but I managed to see some of the confrontation from afar. ZenAku is a beast. He made attacks that I had never seen before, and he moved faster than a bullet train, although he also took a couple of very strong blows." "Yes, luckily All Might came to save us," Kirishima said. "Although, to be honest, it seemed that ZenAku would have been able to defeat him on his own." "Already? I see," Tokoyami muttered. "It's really scary, isn't it?" proposed Ciro. "That is, if I faced a villain as powerful as that gigantic mass, I would have thought twice." "You don't." "Maybe if I were at the top of my power," commented Rikido Sato. "Even though I didn't have a lot of sugar in my system, maybe I could distract enough for others to escape." "I guess I wouldn't trust myself," Shoji said, speaking from one of his tentacles. "Despite my strength, I think I would need some backup. At least you'd have more of a chance than me," Ciro said. "And what do you think, Tokoya?" At that moment he turned behind him, but the crowhead boy was not with him. "Wait, where's Tokoyami? Wasn't he behind us?" In the infirmary, Recovery Girl was talking All Might when Detective Tsukachi arrived in the room. "Oh, All Might, I didn't know you were going to be around here." "Oh, Detective, it's just that I called him here," replied Recovery Girl, an elderly woman in a nurse's uniform. "The ZenAku boy hasn't allowed himself to be examined, and I had to ask All Might to keep him in the infirmary until you arrived. Everything under control, luckily." All Might exclaimed energetically. "I have experience keeping track of young people, after all." Then he put his hand next to his mouth, so that only the detective could hear him. "But to be honest, the ZenAku boy is quite a case." "Well, let me talk to him," the detective requested. Recovery Girl opened the doors to the infirmary, letting them into the area where the beds were. Inside, ZenAku was reclining against one of the walls, holding his abdomen with one arm. "Now they're going to let me go?" ZenAku growled impatiently. It was apparent that the battle had weakened him quite a bit, but he still insisted on leaving the infirmary as soon as possible. There were traces of struggle, with a couple of beds destroyed and a lamp broken. It seemed that it had indeed been necessary to call All Might to restrain him. "Relax, young man. I'm Detective Naomasa Tsukachi, and I have a couple questions to ask you about the attack." Suddenly the detective noticed that there were a couple of drops of blood near the bed, dripping from the armor. "Are you sure you don't need to be checked? You could have serious wounds under the armor." "I've already told the nurse. I don't need to be checked or cured." ZenAku replied sharply. "Well, what does he want? Don't be disrespectful to your superiors. Young ZenAku." He charged him with all might, whereupon ZenAku grunted under his breath. "Anyway, can you identify the person who led the attack? The more details you can provide us, the better," the detective requested, pulling out a notebook. He had white hair and white skin, as if he didn't see much light. He began to describe ZenAku. He had a unitardo and several hands around his body. The individual who created the portals referred to him as Shigaraki, and both the other villains and the giant monster obeyed his every command. Very good. And as for the giant monster, the detective inquired, but ZenAku interrupted him. That brute with the brain from outside. I'm sure I could have defeated him with my hand tied behind my back. ZenAku arrogantly boasted. But someone had to come along to take all the credit. He growled suspiciously, his muzzle pointing in All Might's direction. Ha ha ha, I was just doing my duty. All Mighty clarified. I only saw one of my students under attack and decided to do what I do best, defeat villains in one hit. And no one asked for your help. ZenAku growled again. And if you were able to defeat him with one blow, it was because I'd already weakened him, while you came to steal the glory as always. What did this conceited boy think? All Might said to himself. He was not going to allow him to disrespect him. He was still his teacher first and foremost. It's good to have confidence in yourself, but in situations like this, life or death, confidence can be your downfall. I'm not here for you to lecture me. We're not in class. He challenged ZenAku again. He immediately turned to look at the detective. Do you have any other questions, or can I get out of here? Well, I just want to make sure if the monster was able to communicate at some point, if it showed signs of intelligence. The detective clarified. Although it obeys simple commands, the monster is unable to express itself in coherent sentences beyond basic grunts and gestures, as if it were an animal. In that case, I'm leaving. ZenAku got up to head for the door, but Recovery Girl stopped him, extending both arms. Seriously, Majito, you should let them check you out before you leave. If only you would let me take off your armor to examine you and use my quirk. I already told him no. ZenAku shouted, annoyed, scaring the poor nurse. Even he realized that he had gone too far by disrespecting the poor old woman. I'll be as good as new in a couple of hours. That's all. You can go, the detective told him, walking in front of All Might without even looking at him. ZenAku walked out of the infirmary. The peace symbol only shook its head while Recovery Girl recovered from the shock. Seriously, there are reckless and rude young people, and I had to attend to that boy Bakugo. Recovery Girl said finally. The detective saw her out of the corner of his eye, as he had also had to deal with a young blonde man a few years ago. That's what happens when there's a young man with a particularly powerful quirk. They become confident and arrogant. Almighty said, I'd like to think it's an edgy phase of a hero in training. But there's something about young ZenAku that still doesn't convince me. In what sense? The detective asked. Do you think he's in bad steps, or that he's involved with some criminal association? Oh no, nothing like that, but... All Might tried to explain himself, but couldn't find the words to make himself understood. It's a strange feeling, as if it could be good and evil at the same time. Unbeknownst to any of the individuals in the infirmary, a shadow moved toward the exit. The shadow moved along a couple of corridors until it reached the men's bathroom, where Tokoyami was located. The shadow immediately peeled off the ground and became solid, until it became a kind of bird-like creature. Fumikage, your suspicions are true, said the shadow. ZenAku was in the infirmary, and he confirmed that he had fought the giant monster that All Might defeated in the USJ. Tokoyami folded his arms. What else did you see? Dark shadow. Something interesting? Apparently. ZenAku wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible, as he didn't let Recovery Girl lay a finger on him to heal him. Dark Shadow explained. There was even blood on the floor, and for what I understood, All Might himself wanted to prevent him from leaving. Blood? You say there was blood? Tokoyami asked, surprised. Yes. Still, he didn't let Recovery Girl cure him. It's weird, isn't it? Dark Shadow asked. It's like he's sure he'll heal on his own. Tokoyami concluded, after thinking for a couple of seconds. He patted Dark Shadow on the head a couple of times. Good job, Dark Shadow. I think it's time for us to confront this classmate face to face. Did you do as I commanded you? Yes, Fumikage. I placed a tracking tag on a fold of his robe, as you ordered, before he left the infirmary. Well, as soon as the classes are over, we will continue it. Tokoyami said. Suddenly, Dark Shadow ceased to be a physical entity and was once again part of the crow-headed boy's shadow. We have to know what's going on. Tokoyami waited for the police to let them leave campus to go home. They had strict orders to stay under shelter. But luckily Tokoyami's parents were traveling. Taking out his cell phone, Tokoyami activated the GPS tracking program, and after a couple of minutes of triangulation, the device returned coordinates pointing to a forest on the outskirts of Mustafu. After a subway ride, a bus ride, and a long bike ride, Tokoyami had reached the entrance to the forest. By now, the sun was setting on the horizon, while the waning moon was shining in the sky. Tokoyami turned on the flashlight on his cell phone to go into the forest. Tokoyami's heart beat fast, while the foliage of the trees grew denser. The application told him that the GPS marker was a few meters away, in increasingly inhospitable corners of the wooded area. Did ZenAku really live so far away from society, like an animal? How the hell could I get to school every day on time? Just as he arrived at the place where the GPS marker was, he realized that he was completely alone, not a single animal or insect around. Something was wrong, until suddenly he felt a slight breeze on his back, alerting him to danger. Dark Shadow. Tokoyami shouted suddenly, summoning his quirk to block a powerful thrust in the back, as ZenAku took a couple of steps back after the failed attack. ZenAku! Tokoyami exclaimed, surprised by his classmate's attack. Despite being in low light, Tokoyami could make him out perfectly, realizing that he was wearing his hero suit, or rather his armor. Without saying anything, ZenAku extended one of his arms, showing the satellite tracking tag held between his index finger and thumb. Did you think I wouldn't notice? He grunted as he squeezed the tag tightly between both fingers until it shattered. The next time you do something like this, you'll pay dearly. I'm sorry I did it, but it was the only way you and I could talk completely alone. Tokoyami replied, behind whom Dark Shadow stood, for protection. It was obvious that he expected a backlash from ZenAku, assuming he had something to hide. Well, what do you want? ZenAku asked impatiently, holding a strange dagger in his right hand and pointing it directly at his chest. The only thing I want is that you answer a single question. Who are you really? Tokoyami blurted out. The question lingered in the air for a few seconds, creating a tension so dense in the air that it could be cut with a knife. What nonsense! I am ZenAku. The masked man replied, I'm a powerful Duke Org, and you'd better not meddle where you're not called. ZenAku, and that's your name or your surname. Or maybe it's your nickname, superhero. Huh? Tokoyami asked back, that doesn't matter to you. ZenAku muttered, but before he could continue, Tokoyami interrupted him. I was researching about orgs, actually. So you think you're the same as those dark demons of old? Because if you are, then you have it well studied, or at least it seems so. Tokoyami declared, if you're an org, it means you don't have a quirk, do you? ZenAku paused for a few seconds before answering. My quirk is called dark matter, and my appearance is a result of that quirk. You mean to tell me that all your powers, all your abilities, and on top of that your appearance, are because of your quirk? Tokoyami insisted, because then we're talking about a pretty advanced quirk. Well, what's the problem with that? He defied ZenAku, raising the dagger and preparing to attack him, although at the same time, he looked nervous. My problem with that is that Aizawa-sensei couldn't stop you or your quirk. Tokoyami sentenced. The professor's quirk is capable of disabling the quirk of the people he stares at, but when you faced Bakugo on the first day of school, you were able to summon and disappear your sword without any problems. That's because I'm a demon org. Just because I have a quirk doesn't mean I'm not an org, and therefore I'm much more powerful than the rest of the humans. He began to defend again, but Tokoyami saved him again. And then why are you bleeding? He asked quickly, leaving ZenAku speechless. As far as I know, orgs don't bleed, because they don't have a heart. However, the wounds the monster gave you at the UA cause you to bleed a little in the infirmary. By the way, you already look much better, right? Almost a miracle, considering Recovery Girl didn't lay a finger on you. He asked with a hint of satisfaction. It was true. A few hours ago he looked badly injured, but now he was completely healthy. ZenAku's wolf eyes were fixed on the young Ravenhead, while Dark Shadow behind him maintained a defensive position. What's the point of all this? What do you want to get to? He finally asked her. It's simple. You are lying to all of us, ZenAku, and I want you to tell the truth. Tokoyami threatened him. Do you really want us to believe that the most powerful student of the generation only made it to the UA Academy just because? That you suddenly know about military tactics and advanced attacks, while your academic record doesn't yield any results? And why did you call Bakugo Kaken? Do you know him? ZenAku grunted under his breath, as his breathing grew heavier and heavier. Tokoyami looked at the humanoid wolf seriously. He already had it on the ropes. I researched the demon wolf rookie. He was bloodthirsty, ruthless, and evil. Why would someone like that want to join a superhero academy, especially if you live so far from school? At that moment, ZenAku looked away, as if he didn't have a clear answer. That was all Tokoyami needed to know. So many inconsistencies can only mean one thing. Everything you say you are making up. It's that, or you don't even know what's going on, which is just as suspicious. It's almost like you don't know who you really are. Of course I know who I am. AM for sure. ZenAku replied, but the insecurity in his tone of voice was more than evident. In doubt. His hand began to tremble, letting go of the dagger until he fell to the ground. So, are you a human in the form of a demon, or are you a demon who appears to be a humanoid wolf? No, I don't. Do you really want to be a hero, or are you spying on the academy? Enough, What's your real name? My name. ZenAku had frozen. What was I supposed to answer? His name was ZenAku. He always had been, or had he? Why couldn't I remember anything that had happened beyond a year ago? And Kaken, why did that name sound familiar? I remember. Tokoyami's heart was in full swing, while Dark Shadow looked curiously at the confused wolf. ZenAku tried to remember. He could vaguely remember something from his past. Flashes of a boy with green hair and freckles. But just as the image was beginning to form in his head, a powerful migraine invaded him. Tokoyami suddenly lost concentration from the interrogation, seeing ZenAku holding his mask with both hands. Wait! What's wrong with you? Are you okay? Tokoyami approached cautiously, as the wolf growled in pain and tried to compose himself. As he approached him, however, Dark Shadow began to get upset. He felt a powerful flow of evil energy coming out of ZenAku's mask, surrounding his body while his yellow eyes glowed in the darkness. ZenAku shook as the migraine was identified, while his memories were altered to hide his true identity. Worried, Tokoyami walked over to the companion, putting a hand on his shoulder, but as soon as he put on, ZenAku's gloved hand gripped it tightly, glaring at him furiously with his amber eyes still glowing. What are you doing here? He asked furiously. How did you know where I was? What? Tokoyami asked, confused. I put a tracking tag on you. Don't you remember? ZenAku took the dagger from the ground, threatening Tokoyami directly. Etiquette? What the hell are you talking about? Tokoyami looked at ZenAku, puzzled. What had just happened? If 10 minutes ago, ZenAku had confronted him with the label, why didn't he recognize it now? But if we just talked about that, we talked about who you really were, about your real name. Tokoyami asked in confusion, but now it was ZenAku who interrupted him. What the hell are you talking about? I am ZenAku, the Wolf Duke Org. I always have been. He replied in a rather threatening tone, as if the previous conversation had not happened. Tokoyami took a couple of steps back. What was going on? Well, I have to go. You better get out. ZenAku growled, extending both arms. This is MY Forest. No one else can enter here without my authorization, understand? Tokoyami stood still for a moment before turning and leaving. As much as he was tempted, he did not look back, but he felt ZenAku's eyes digging into the back of his neck, watching him until he reached the edge of the forest. Fumikage. He called it Dark Shadow. I know, Dark Shadow. I felt it too. He replied. They had both felt that same dark aura on a previous occasion, when they met ZenAku for the first time. That's not a quirk, Fumikage. Dark Shadow continued. I know, he replied again, but fell silent as his brain raced along, processing what happened. All his life, Tokoyami had become obsessed with the supernatural and the dark, as a defense mechanism to accept his status as a heteromorphic human. Although he knew that there were no such things as curses and demons, deep down he hoped to one day encounter a phenomenon that wasn't explained as a quirk. But the masked wolf wasn't a quirk user. He was indeed a being with a powerful curse. Now he understood All Might's comment. He had felt as if an evil energy emanated from his being and enveloped him, as if he were truly a creature of darkness. And now, what are we going to do, Fumikage? Dark Shadow asked, worried. Fumikage turned to the sky, where the waning moon lay. I have to find out why ZenAku can't remember anything about his past. The only thing I can think of is that he is the victim of a powerful curse. He finally said, and what are we going to do? He asked again. Tokoyami got on the bike to return to the city as soon as possible. Next Monday there will be a new moon. According to Kirishima, its power increases as the full moon approaches. What if the opposite happens on the new moon? We don't know that, Fumikage, Dark Shadow asserted. So, we'll have to find out. Tokoyami concluded. If ZenAku is cursed, we have to do our best to help him, don't you think? Dark Shadow shrugged, as he returned to Tokoyami's shadow as he pedaled toward the city. Just be careful, Tokoyami. We may be entering uncharted territory. Tokoyami simply decided to go on his way, fearful and excited. At last something dark and supernatural was happening around him, and no matter what, I would get to the bottom of it.